Chapter 1077. 5 minutes ago, Cece, who was watering her little botanical garden with her little aunt in the yard, talked about the blooming of the radish tassels some time ago. The flowers have withered. Papa said that we have to wait for the next blooming. We don't know when the next one will be. The little girl said regretfully as she followed Young Juan, who was carrying a watering can. Young Juan smiled and said, "It's okay. Remember, if the radish blooms next time, you must ask me to come and see it." Of course, Young Juan was just joking. She had seen all kinds of crops in the countryside before. She pretended to be curious because she wanted to cooperate with Shi and make her happy. However, the little girl took it seriously. She felt that her aunt really wanted to see the radish blooms. Therefore, the enthusiastic little girl racked her brains to help her aunt realize her dream. Shi's eyes lit up as she thought about it. She said happily to Young Juan, "Aunt, I know. Let me show you the photos." There were still some photos that her father had printed. After saying that, Shi turned around and ran upstairs excitedly. Young Juan couldn't stop her. Who knew that Cece, who had run upstairs in high spirits, would see a scene that made her scream as soon as she entered the bedroom. Xiao Guai was squatting on the table, and the cat was staring at the little girl in the cage. Shi was so happy when she came back that she left Xiao Yu's cage on the table and ran downstairs to play with her aunt. She forgot to close the door of the bedroom. And Xiao Guai, who was usually elusive, had actually seized such a coincidental opportunity to appear in the bedroom. Of course, she didn't know if little Guai wasn't interested in Xiao Yu or if it couldn't open the birdcage. Anyway, when Cece ran up, she saw little Guai sizing up Xiao Yu with its tail wagging from side to side in boredom. However, because Cece ran over and screamed, little Guai became even more excited. It jumped from the table and landed firmly on the ground with its chubby body. Then, it intimately moved to its little master's side and used its body to rub against Cece's ankle. However, no matter whether Bab had the intention to violate Xiao Yu or not, Shi pouted unhappily. She looked at Xiao Yu in the cage and made sure that it was fine. It was just a little scared. Xiao Yu, who was usually lively, shrank to the wire fence on the second floor of the cage. Then, she squatted down and held Bab's chubby face angrily. She said angrily, "Bab, you are not good at all. How can you eat Xiao Yu? Xiao Yu is our good friend." Bab looked at Shi innocently with its round eyes and thin pupils. Meow. It sounded a little confused. Although nothing major happened, Shi's earth-shattering scream still startled Yang Yi, who was preparing lunch downstairs. His ears were very sensitive and he could hear Shi's scream from afar. Yang Yi thought that something big had happened. He didn't even wash his hands and hurriedly ran upstairs with meat on them. Fortunately, when he ran upstairs, he saw that nothing had happened. She was just angrily scolding Bab. "Papa, Bab wants to eat Xiao Yu." When the little girl saw her father come upstairs, she immediately felt confident and hurriedly asked him for help. "What should I do?" "Papa, I don't want Xiao Yu to be eaten. Don't think that this is a small matter." The little girl was so anxious that she was about to cry. Because she remembered that she had actively applied to the teacher for Xiao Yu to be a guest at her house this weekend. If she went back next week and could only carry an empty cage to school, how embarrassed would the little girl be? When she saw the dangerous scene just now, she felt that she had let down her classmates and teachers. She didn't take good care of Xiao Yu. She couldn't even compare to the class monitor Chao Rolin, who she didn't trust before. Thinking of this, Shi's heart felt especially uncomfortable. It's okay. Bab is probably just playing a prank. Look, isn't Xiao Yu fine?" Yang Yi hurriedly squatted down and hugged Shi to comfort her. Yang Yi knew that his hands were dirty, so he could only think of a way. He used the inside of his forearm to gently stroke the little girl's hair and simply comfort Shi, whose eyes were misty and was about to cry. But I'm still scared. Papa, I'm scared that Xiao Yu will really be eaten." Shi said in her father's arms, feeling wronged. Bab, Little Gray, and Little Bun are all very naughty. What she was worried about was indeed a relatively big problem. Yang Yi thought carefully and felt that he used to think that Xiaoya would be able to live in their house safely with the protection of the cage, but now he realized that it didn't seem to be possible. Just like the little goldfish, when they took care of Xiaoya, there were still times when they were careless. Back then, they were careless and forgot to cover the fish tank. Little Bun, that little guy, was actually able to take advantage of the gap and kill a little goldfish. Although domestic cats and dogs didn't have much desire to eat goldfish, birds, or even mice, they were animals after all. Especially Bab and the others, the nature of cats was there. Even if they didn't eat, they had the habit of teasing these prey. Xiaoya was so small, and if she was teased by these guys without restraint, she would probably die. And Xiaoya wasn't a goldfish. If it died, where would Yang Yi find a second Xiaoya for Shi? Moreover, now that Shi had grown up a lot and was much smarter, it wouldn't be so easy to fool her. So, he had to think of a way. After lunch, Yang Yi accompanied Shi and carried the birdcage and Xiaoya to Lan Xian's house. Xian, you have to help me take good care of Xiaoya. Shi reluctantly put Xiaoya down, then pulled Lan Xian's hand, shook her little butt, and said in a sad tone, "It's okay. I've helped you take care of Xiaoya in school. Leave Xiaoya to me, don't worry." Lan Xian was like a big sister, patting her fleshy little chest, and said happily, But you have to help me take good care of Bai Bai." Bai Bai was Lan Xian's Samoyed. It was much bigger than Steamed Bun, and was usually quite docile. However, it was said that sometimes Bai Bai wasn't as obedient as its angelic appearance, and sometimes it would be unrestrained. Anyway, Shi and Lan Xian had discussed on the phone just now. In order to ensure Xiaoya's safety at their house, Xiaoya would temporarily spend the weekend at Lan Xian's house, because Lan Xian only had one dog, so it was easier to move. But cats were troublesome. Xiao Guai and the rest liked to run around. Even if they went to Lan Xian's house, they might sneak back at night, so it was still not safe. So, Xiaoya stayed at Lan Xian's house, and this Samoyed called Bai Bai was going to be a guest at Shi's house for 2 days. It didn't matter. After all, Bai Bai was often taken by Lan Xian to play with Steamed Bun, so it was very familiar with Shi's house. Yang Yi looked at Shi's reluctant look, and said with a smile, Shi, don't worry. Xiaoya staying at Xian Heir's house is the same as staying at our house, isn't it? It's so close. You can go to Xian Heir's house in the afternoon, play with her, and take care of Xiaoya together. Yes. Lan Xian beamed with joy and said, Shi, you can come over and help me feed Xiaoya the bugs. What's so scary about that? These are dead bugs that can't be moved. Cici had already forgotten her initial fear. However, it made sense. These worms were all dried worms. Cici had fed Xiaoya a lot of them, so she had already gotten used to it. How could she still feel afraid? The little girl could even use her hands to catch the bugs. She was much braver than before. But Lan Xian still didn't like the appearance of these bugs. Usually, she would use Shi's little tweezers to catch the bugs from a distance. So she pouted and argued, They're dead, but they're still bugs. After entrusting Xiaoya to Lan Xian, Yang Yi and Shi brought Lan Xian's Samoyed home. But he didn't know what kind of special reaction Bai Bai's arrival would have. Chapter 1078. Ha. Yang Yi and Shi brought the Samoyed Whitey home. Steamed Bun ran over and played with Whitey. However, this silly Steamed Bun was not reserved at all. He wagged his tail, shook his head, jumped up and down, and even cried out excitedly. He was so excited that he was like a young man who saw his crush for the first time. But this was not because of hormones. Steamed Bun and Whitey were both female dogs. Could it be that Steamed Bun also chased after idols? Maybe Whitey, who was as beautiful as an angel, was Steamed Bun's idol dog. Ignoring the excited Steamed Bun, Yang Yi saw that Bai Bai's arrival did not shock or anger the indigenous Steamed Bun. In addition, Xiao Guai and the others were also very calm on the cat tree in the side hall. Yang Yi relaxed. Be good and play with Steamed Bun. We're going to rest. Yang Yi smiled and patted Whitey, who was also running in circles because of Steamed Bun jumping up and down. After reminding him, he led Shi upstairs. The little girl was a little listless when it was time for her afternoon nap. The owners all went upstairs. The large space on the first floor became Steamed Bun and Whitey's world. Of course, it would be even better if the three eyesores next to them weren't there. Because of Steamed Bun's welcome, Whitey was not very alert to Yang Yi's new environment. After Yang Yi and the others went upstairs, Whitey bent down and lay down comfortably on the corridor in front of the stairs. After all, Whitey was a lot bigger than Steamed Bun. Whether it was because of its fluffy fur or not, when it lay down on the ground, it was like a large white truck in front of Steamed Bun, who was as small as a bumblebee. Steamed Bun had no intention of lying down. He wagged his tail excitedly. The strength of his tail was so strong that it seemed like his but was also twisting. Not only did it run around in front of Bye-Bye, but it also acted like a spoiled brat. One moment, it wagged its tail in front of Bye-Bye, and the next moment, it leaned its head over and rubbed against Bye-Bye's head. It was as if it was burrowing its head under Bye-Bye's chest. Then, it stuck close to Bye-Bye and rolled around on the ground. However, this was not enough. After it was done, it jumped up from the ground as if it had endless energy. It ran to the side and lay on the ground to see if Bye-Say had followed it. However, Whitey was a little reserved. It only turned its head, stuck out its tongue, and looked at the bun with a smile. "Why don't you understand what I mean?" Steamed Bun was so anxious that he repeated his previous actions. First, he rubbed his head against Bye-Say's ear, then he jumped to the door and turned his head to look at Bye-Say. As if he felt that his intentions weren't obvious enough, Bao arched his buttocks and threw himself on the ground. He turned his head to the door and looked at Bye-Say. If a dog could speak, Steamed Bun would have said, "Do you understand? I mean, go out and have fun. I beg you." Bye-Say was finally moved by Bao. It got up from the ground and followed behind Bao. The door to the villa was closed by Yang Yi, but Bao and the three cats never needed to open the door. If they wanted to go out or come back to eat, they would go through the dog hole that Yang Yi had specially installed for them. From the outside of the villa, the originally ordinary door suddenly had a small cover that was painted the same color as the wooden door open. A dog head with short yellow fur poked out. It looked left and right, then easily squeezed half of its body out of the dog hole. It stretched out its front legs, and with a kick of its hind legs, its body jumped out. After Bao came out, he ran 2 steps away and wagged his tail. He turned his head back to look, as if waiting for Bye-Say to appear. Not long after, a white head squeezed out of the dog hole somewhat awkwardly. After squeezing out, the fluffy hair allowed people to recognize that the white furry ball was Bye-Bye's head. Squeezing through a dog hole could be said to be a relatively new experience for Bye-Say. But Bye-Say still looked around happily before continuing to squeeze out. But it seemed that this small dog hole was a serious test for Bye-Say's huge body. Its fluffy hair had already covered the door of the dog hole, but when it squeezed into its body, Bye-Say, who had shrunk a lot, was still stuck. Bye-Say squeezed out strenuously. Bao also wagged his tail in front of it and ran back and forth, as if to encourage Bye-Say. But maybe it really couldn't. Its 2 front paws couldn't reach out, and because it tried so hard to get out, part of its front legs were stuck in the dog hole. Gotcha! With a crisp sound, the dog hole's cover was squeezed off by Bye-Say, and the rubber ring was strung on Bye-Say's body. This seemed to give Bao and Bye-Say some hope, because Bye-Say took the opportunity to squeeze out a little more. But the dog hole wasn't big to begin with, and in the end, Bye-Say still couldn't squeeze out. Now, a bigger problem appeared. Bye-Say was stuck in a position where it couldn't move forward or backward. Its hind legs moved, but it found that it couldn't move, no matter how hard it tried. Woo-woo! Bye-Say was dumbfounded, and wailed to Bao for help. This position was very uncomfortable. Its front legs couldn't touch the ground, its hind legs were slipping, and its stomach was uncomfortable. "I'm going to die, I'm going to die." Steamed Bun was also anxiously pacing back and forth. He tried to bite the dog hole's door cover, as if he thought he could pull Whitey out of the hole. However, only the door cover was pulled. Soon, Steamed Bun broke the rubber band and the door cover was flung to the ground. But Bai Sei still couldn't move. What should I do? Just as Bao Bao was anxiously pacing around, Bai Sei, who was stuck in the door hole for a while, showed a strange expression. Then, it was so anxious that it started to flop on the ground, whimpering in fear. What happened? A few minutes ago, when Bao Bao brought Bai Sei out, Little Gray, who was lying on the cat tree and sleeping with its eyes closed, opened its eyes. Why are you sleeping? It's such a beautiful afternoon, let's go out and play. Therefore, Little Gray jumped down from the cat tree, squatted behind Bai Sei's butt, and prepared to line up to go out. But who knew that Bai Sei would be stuck? Little Gray looked at Bai Sei's anxiousness as it kicked its legs and wagged its tail. It found it very interesting, so it tilted its head and looked at it for a while. Finally, Bai Sei was tired and wanted to rest. Little Gray jumped up, and when its fluffy big tail stopped moving, it grabbed it with its claws. Chapter 1079. Yang Yi was taking an afternoon nap upstairs. Suddenly, his ears twitched slightly. Following that, a pair of sharp eyes suddenly opened. A trace of sharpness was hidden in his eyes, and it was replaced by deep doubt. He seemed to have heard a rustling sound just now. It seemed to have come from the kitchen. Even though the rooms on the second floor were soundproof, it was impossible for him to be hallucinating. Yang Yi knew that with his ability, Murphy and she couldn't hear anything, but with his enhanced ears, he could still hear very subtle sounds. Moreover, Yang Yi also believed in his own judgment. Even though he had lived a peaceful life for a long time, the dangerous days of a hail of bullets were still vivid in his mind. Some reactions, or even sixth sense, were very accurate. But why was there such a big commotion? Was there a burglar in the house? Yang Yi pondered as he lifted the blanket and stood up from the bed. What's wrong now? Just now when little Sophie was taking a nap next to her, he kept kicking his legs and groaning for a while. In fact, Mo Fei had just laid down for less than 10 minutes, and now she was disturbed by his movements again. She lay on her side on the bed, squinted her eyes lazily, and muttered with her mouth pouted. It's nothing. Go back to sleep. Yang Yi smiled and comforted Murphy. He opened the door and walked out. What Yang Yi didn't expect was that when he went down the stairs, Steamed Bun was anxiously jumping up and they just happened to meet at the corner. Steamed Bun was overjoyed. He snorted and ran around Yang Yi's feet. Because this was a staircase, he still had to go up and down. Yang Yi was a little confused. What are you doing? Did you hear a noise? Yang Yi rubbed Steamed Bun's head and asked with a smile. Steamed Bun bit Yang Yi's sleeve. He wagged his tail vigorously and tried to pull Yang Yi down. Okay, I'll go with you. Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He knocked on Steamed Bun's head, making it loosen its mouth. Then, he followed it to the door downstairs. Yang Yi immediately understood what was going on when he saw a white, fluffy but stuck in the dog hole. He laughed out loud in a very unkind manner. Steamed Bun was a little anxious. He looked up at his master and jumped on the ground. Then, he stood up and placed his 2 front paws on his master's body. Bai Bai was also quite pitiful. Hearing the movement behind him, he kicked his legs with lingering fear, but it was futile. His every move made people feel sad. All right, don't worry, I'll get it out. Yang Yi smiled and unlocked the door. He pushed open the door that wasn't locked by Bai Bai. This time, Yang Yi saw Bai Bai in a sorry state. Bai Bai, who was originally smiling like an angel, was now listless. His aggrieved eyes also gave people a feeling of listlessness. You guys broke the dog door just to go out and play. Yang Yi looked at the dog door cover that was removed, and then looked at the claw marks on the door outside. He couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and ask in surprise. Steamed Bun seemed to have realized that he had done something wrong. He lowered his head and didn't dare to look directly at Yang Yi. He only dared to circle around Yang Yi's feet like a spoiled child. Then, He reached out his claws and scratched on Yang Yi's trousers. This little guy seemed to be saying, "Forget it, forget it." Yang Yi only smiled and didn't pursue the matter. He squatted down, rubbed Steamed Bun and Bai Bai's heads, and said in a bad mood, "You guys, I told you to play obediently downstairs. Now, I have to get someone to repaint it." Although he was reprimanding them, Yang Yi still reached out and helped Bai Bai out. It was convenient to have hands. Yang Yi pushed Bai Bai's stuck leg inside. After pushing out the leg muscles, Bai Bai's body loosened a little. He felt it himself and happily pulled his body out. After being stuck for a while, Bai Bai's body wasn't used to it. He struggled on the ground for a while before he found the feeling of standing up. He was finally saved. Bai Bai was wild with joy. He used his soft head to rub Yang Yi's chest as he squatted down. After all, he was his savior. However, Yang Yi was a little absent-minded. He was still frowning, as if he was thinking about something. What was that strange noise from the kitchen? The claw marks on the door definitely didn't come from Bai Bai. He was stuck before he could reach out. Since Steamed Bun caught him outside, Bai Bai was stuck outside for so long. How did Steamed Bun get in? In the afternoon, Shi woke up naturally. However, the little girl didn't want to stay in bed because she missed Xiao Ye, who was temporarily staying at Lan Xian's house. She obediently got out of bed and went to the bathroom to wash her face and change her clothes. "Papa, I want to go to Xian Heir's house to play." She found that her father wasn't in the bedroom next door. She ran downstairs and found her father in the kitchen. She was very happy to speak. However, she quickly blinked her eyes in confusion. She saw that her father wasn't cooking in the kitchen. Instead, he was squatting on the floor and cleaning up some broken porcelain pieces. "Don't come in. I haven't cleaned it up yet. Be careful not to prick your feet." Yang Yi hurriedly reminded Shi, who hadn't walked in yet. Shi looked at her father strangely. She simply hugged her knees and squatted at the door, as if she was also working with her father. She asked curiously, "Papa, why? Why are these plates broken?" Yang Yi shook his head gently and said with a wry smile, "You have to ask Steamed Bun about this. He did it." Yes, the strange noise Yang Yi heard upstairs was the sound of these plates breaking. Steamed Bun couldn't come in through the door, so he found a way and jumped in through the open kitchen windowsill. Fortunately, although Steamed Bun broke the porcelain plates, he was more sensitive and didn't step on the broken porcelain pieces. He didn't hurt himself. Yang Yi only slightly blamed Steamed Bun for his recklessness and didn't care too much. If the plates were broken, they could just buy more. If Steamed Bun was hurt, Yang Yi would be worried and upset. Although Yang Yi and Shi would sometimes blame Steamed Bun for some of his mistakes and even make him the scapegoat, no matter what, they still loved Steamed Bun. There was also Little Guai, Little Gray, and Dondo. They were all family. How many happy memories did they have with each other? Not to mention, Steamed Bun also accompanied Tong Tong as he grew up. How could Yang Yi bear to let Steamed Bun get hurt? Although the villa was in a mess, Yang Yi still opened the door and let Steamed Bun and Whitey play in the grass in the yard. Time rewound to the time before the strange noise in the kitchen. Whitey was stuck at the door for a while. Steamed Bun could only anxiously walk in circles in front of the door. He didn't know how to enter the house and ask his master for help. However, after Little Gray got tired of playing with Whitey's tail, Steamed Bun pricked up his ears and turned his head to follow Little Gray's position in the house. His ears were very sensitive. Soon after, he heard the sound of Little Gray jumping down from the kitchen windowsill. Not long after, Little Gray walked past Steamed Bun and Whitey with his elegant cat steps. He didn't even turn around to look at Steamed Bun and Whitey, who looked a little sad. No, Whitey didn't have any balls. It was just Whitey's sadness. Steamed Bun looked at Little Gray with shining eyes. He now had a way to enter the house. Chapter 1080. Little you, let me tell you. You don't even know what Xiaoya went through at our house over the weekend. On Monday, Shi returned to school with Xiao Ye, who was safe and sound. She placed Xiao Ya's bird cage on the table at the back of the classroom and filled her sink with fresh water before excitedly returning to her seat. With one leg propped up and the other bent on the chair, she couldn't wait to tell Lu Xiaoyu. The little girl felt that it was already very difficult for her to send Xiaoyu back safely, so after letting go of the heavy burden in her heart, she became in high spirits. Lu Xiaoyu's reaction was a little slow. She seemed to be in a daze for 2 seconds before she looked at Shi in confusion and asked, "What did you go through?" Perhaps it was because she had more fun on the weekends and was used to sleeping in, and she had to wake up early for school this morning, but every time Lu Xiaoyu came back on Monday, she looked like an office worker. She was listless and had a listless expression on her face. However, Shi's work and rest had always been very regular, regardless of whether it was the weekend or on weekdays, so she was still in high spirits. She beamed with joy as she told Lu Xiaoyu, "That's right, Xaner and I just brought Xiaoyu home, and then our family's dog, Steamed Bun. Do you still remember?" Lu Xiaoyu quite liked Steamed Bun, but it was a pity that her family didn't raise a dog for her. However, at the mention of Steamed Bun, Lu Xiaoyu's interest was piqued. She nodded repeatedly. "That's right, Steamed Bun." He ran over and wanted to see Xiaoyu, but Xaner and I were both scared by Steamed Bun. We were afraid that Steamed Bun would scare Xiaoyu. Even though Shi's speech was very nimble, her thoughts always moved faster than her mouth. Thus, while she was still talking about Steamed Bun, she immediately changed the topic and giggled, "Hey, right, little you, let me tell you. My papa said that Xiaoyu has been fed by us until she's fat, so she can't be like this. If I get any fatter, I won't be able to fly anymore. He. Lu Xiaoyu was not easily amused. She found Shi's words very amusing, so she also laughed. This further encouraged Shi's desire to talk. Thus, the young lady started from Xiaoyu's exploration in the bushes, and then talked about Xiaoyu's danger in her room. Fortunately, she appeared like a divine soldier from the heavens, and rescued Xiaoyu from Xiaoyu's bloody mouth. He didn't know if it was because she had heard too many stories from her father and was influenced by him, or if it was because Cici had grown up over the years and had become more eloquent. The little girl's stories were very exciting, with all kinds of twists and turns and all kinds of ups and downs. Gradually, not only was Lu Xiaoyu listening, Shi and Lu Xiaoyu's seats, the two boys in front of them, also turned their heads to listen. Behind them, Chen Yuxuan was propped up on someone else's table, his eyes wide open as he listened with a face full of surprise. His expression was the most varied, but when he heard that Xiaoyu was in danger, Chen Yuxuan showed a terrified expression. When he heard that Xiaoyu was saved, and that she was lucky enough to escape the calamity caused by Steamed Bun and Whitey causing havoc in the heavenly palace, at least from Shi's point of view, the young lady would not have thought of the cause and effect behind this. Chen Yuxuan's face was full of joy. It could be said that he was very supportive. Unfortunately, Shi did not know that he was eavesdropping. She was only happily telling Lu Xiaoyu the story of the weekend. However, Shi's happy time was quickly coming to an end. Teacher Li Rulan walked in and called the group of little monkeys to quickly return to their seats. Take out your textbooks and read the 7th lesson, Little Pine Tree and Big Pine Tree, this morning. Do you still remember that the teacher asked you to memorize this lesson last weekend? There will be a spot check in class later, so hurry up and revise now. The teacher's arrival disbanded Shi's story club, but the little girl still wanted to continue. She took out her textbook and whispered to Lu Xiaoyu in a low voice, "Little fishy, there's still one more thing that I haven't told you. I'll tell you after class." Lu Xiaoyu seemed a little absent-minded. She took out her textbook in a panic and nervously muttered, "It's over. Shi, I forgot to memorize the lesson. You have to help me pray that the teacher doesn't pick me to memorize the lesson." Shi did not have time to comfort Lu Xiaoyu, because the language representative was already reading the lesson loudly. Shi and Lu Xiaoyu hurriedly followed suit. There's a little pine tree on the mountain and a big pine tree at the foot of the mountain. The little pine tree said to the big pine tree, "Hey, friend, look how tall I am. I can see very, very far. What about you?" The big pine tree did not answer. Shi liked this lesson very much. Moreover, after the reading class last Friday, Shi and Lan Xin also listened to Yu Xiaowei's demonstration of this lesson. Sister Xiaowei read it with great emotion. Uncle Feng touched the little pine tree's head and said, "Child, the pine tree at the foot of the mountain is much taller than you. You can see very far because Grandpa Dashan lifted you up." When the little pine tree heard this, he lowered his head in shame. This time, when Cici was reading this text, she couldn't help but imitate Sister Xiaowei. She read Uncle Feng's words out loud with full emotion. Especially when she read the words, Grandpa Dashan, and lifted up, she read it very hard. Her tone was deep and emotional, but a little too hard. After all, she had not systematically learned how to read aloud elegantly. Her earnest and emotional look was very cute. Li Rulin happened to pass by Shi. When she saw this scene, she could not help but smile. Shi did not know the teacher's true thoughts. She felt that when the teacher passed by, she was sitting upright and still, trying hard to perform. Now that she caught a glimpse of the teacher's smile, the little girl thought that the teacher was praising her. Suddenly, she felt a sense of accomplishment and worked even harder to read the rest of the lesson. After Li Rulin patrolled the class for 2 weeks, she returned to the podium. She still had to stay behind to supervise the morning reading class. After all, these first-grade children's self-control was still a little weak. If she or the other teachers in charge of the morning reading class were not watching, some of them might quietly slack off and not study. Standing on the podium, she could still serve as a deterrent. It was the same reason that an examiner had to sit in front of the examination room during an exam. Of course, in order not to waste time, Li Rulin opened the children's diaries that the subject representative had helped her collect in the morning and began to correct the children's diaries. After the last spring outing, Li Rulin had started to teach the students to write diaries. The children had complained a lot, but they had gradually gotten used to it recently. Of course, Li Rulin still knew a thing or two about the children's abilities. She did not set any thresholds for their diaries. Some children would write more, such as Shi and Chao Rolin, who were serious students. Some children would write less, such as Chan Yuxuan and the other children who did not like to study. 1 or 2 sentences would become a diary entry, but Li Rulin did not blame them. Even now, Li Rulin was holding a red pen and correcting the diaries. She did not want to give marks. The so-called correction was just to see if the children had completed the diaries and give some feedback based on the content. For example, now that she had opened Chan Yuxuan's diary, there were only a few sentences in the previous Friday's diary that had not been corrected yet. Tonight, Mom said, "Chan Yuxuan, take this garbage out." I said, "Yes." The garbage was so heavy. But I was very strong, so I took the garbage downstairs and threw it out. Chan Yuxuan's diary was already much better than before. At least, it had changed from a simple sentence, "Nothing happened today." It was so boring. Now, it was 2 or 3 sentences, and it even told a short story. Therefore, Li Rulin picked up the red pen and wrote a few words of praise below. Then she wrote, "However, you still have a lot of room for improvement. For example, when you took the garbage out today, you can add some details. For example, when you took the garbage out, did the heavy feeling make you feel tired? For example, when you took the garbage downstairs, did you meet other people? For example, after you helped Mom take the garbage out, did Mom praise you?" These are all things that you can mention. Li Rulin did not pick. She read the diaries according to the order in which they were placed. Although she preferred to read Shi's diary, there were many interesting stories in it. It could be said that reading Shi's diary was as interesting as reading a storybook. However, after all, she still had to take care of and educate every student, regardless of whether they wrote well or poorly. Take Chan Yuxuan for example. Although his writing was not as good as Shi's, Li Rulin still gave a lot of comments. Moreover, she also saw Chan Yuxuan's delightful improvement. After correcting the Saturday and Sunday diaries, Li Rulin put down Chan Yuxuan's diary and picked up the next one. The signature was Lan Xin. Li Rulin flipped open the diary and read it carefully. Suddenly, she frowned slightly and her expression became serious. Moreover, her eyes began to show hesitation. Chapter 1081. Lan Zhou-kai had gone to Jinling City to inspect the construction progress of the amusement park, and Wu Jingjing didn't check on Lan Xian's homework often. Therefore, Lan Xian's situation hadn't been exposed yet. This weekend, Murphy was going to hold a concert in Chengdu. Therefore, on Friday afternoon, after she finished school, Yang Yi took her, Lan Xian, and Tong Tong on a plane to Chengdu. Why was Lan Xian included? Because of this trip to Chengdu, Yang Yi planned to use this good opportunity to take Cici to see the pandas and try the famous delicacies of Chengdu. After hearing from Shi that there were so many wonderful arrangements, Lan Xian ran home and went to find Papa Yang with her remaining 4 gold coins. Papa Yang, can I use 1 gold coin to see a panda, and then use 3 gold coins to eat something delicious? Lan Xian looked at Yang Yi expectantly with her watery eyes. Obviously, 1 gold coin wasn't enough to see pandas. At most, she could only see the pictures of pandas that she brought back. And 3 gold coins wasn't enough to eat much delicious food. However, looking at Lan Xian's pitiful eyes, Yang Yi touched his conscience and finally accepted Lan Xian's 4 gold coins. He pretended that it was a promotion for the half-year anniversary of the opening of Gold Coin Mall and gave Lan Xian a first-class plane ticket. It had to be said that the first-class cabin of a domestic flight was very different from the first-class cabin of an international flight. Yang Yi and the others were on the plane from Zhongqing to Chengdu. The first-class cabin was similar to the business-class cabin, and it was arranged in pairs with 6 seats in a row. The luxury of the seats couldn't be compared to the first-class cabin of an international flight. At a glance, it seemed similar to the economy-class cabin. At most, the gap between the seats was bigger, the seats could be reclined, and there were armrests on both sides. The small table was more spacious, and of course, there was a small sofa behind the front row for feet and luggage. It sounded quite complete, but it did look a little shabby. However, Yang Yi had been on it many times and was used to it. Moreover, Yang Yi was more concerned about the fact that there were fewer people in the first-class cabin and it was more private. With his identity, it wouldn't be easy to cause a sensation. For the children, the luxury of the seats wasn't within their scope of concern. After Shi and Lan Xian got on the plane, they ran around excitedly. The 2 girls jostled each other as they ran to the front and couldn't stop giggling. Yang Yi and the others were the first batch of passengers to come to the first-class cabin. There was no one else around, so Yang Yi didn't care about the noise of Shi and Lan Xian. He was busy putting Tong Tong, who was in his arms, on the seat and putting the square suitcase that he carried with him on the small sofa in front. But soon, new first-class passengers came up. It was an elderly couple who were dressed fashionably. They looked like they were in their 50s or 60s. The stewardess was taking their tickets and leading them to the seats at the back. Yang Yi looked up and waved his hand to Shi and Lan Xian. The 2 girls were standing in a row, looking out the window of the plane and chattering. "Don't disturb others. We are now in a public place, so you can't be as casual as you are at home. You have to speak softly, and you can't run around." Yang Yi gently rubbed the 2 girls' heads and said with a smile, "Let's make a small agreement, okay? Today on the plane, let me see who is the most obedient. Tomorrow, when we go to see the panda, I'll buy you a big ice cream, and the other one can only watch the other eat." A big ice cream? Cici's and Lonqin's eyes lit up at the same time. Now that the weather was hot, eating ice cream was simply the most comfortable enjoyment. Even if the weather wasn't hot, ice cream was still very attractive to children. "I'm the most obedient," Lan Xian hurriedly shouted. She stuck out her chest and looked very straight. "No, good children, you can't speak loudly." She was more direct. She pulled Lan Xian's hand and whispered. However, although the 2 girls were no longer as noisy as they were when they first boarded the plane because of the temptation of the ice cream, they were still driven by endless energy and the excitement brought about by the trip. After a while, they began to gather together and whisper to each other. Yang Yi bought 4 adjacent first-class tickets. Although Tong Tong wanted to sit with him, and it was a bit of a waste to have a ticket, Yang Yi bought 1 more just in case. Who knows, maybe Tong Tong wanted to sit alone during the flight. Therefore, These 4 seats gave Lon Xin and Shi space to play. Yang Yi sat in the middle seat so that he could take care of Tong Tong and Shi and Lon Xin, who were sitting on the other side of the aisle. However, the 2 girls were restless. The plane flew steadily in the sky. When it was time to unfasten the seat belts, Shi and Lon Xin began to whisper to each other. No one knew what they were talking about, but they began to run excitedly from seat to seat. After a while, Shi ran to Lon Xin's seat. She giggled and sat on the small sofa in front of Lon Xin. Of course, this gap was very wide. Only adults could put their feet on it. Lon Xin and Shi could not reach it. Lon Xin jumped down from her seat and ran to Shi's small sofa. She sat side by side with Shi. Yang Yi did not understand what the 2 girls were playing. Anyway, they whispered to each other for a while. Shi sat on Lon Xin's seat again. After a while, Lon Xin jumped down from the small sofa and ran to the seat next to Yang Yi. Then, she looked for a gap between Yang Yi and Tong Tong and smiled silently at Shi. That's right. In order to appear obedient, even if they were playing, they deliberately made no sound. Little Momo, on the other hand, was teased by the 2 sisters who were running around. He was originally sitting obediently in his father's arms and watching the cartoon on the small screen in front of him, but now he felt that the cartoon was no longer interesting. Hey! The little boy groaned. He pulled away his father's big hand and slid down the seat. His feet could not reach the seat. He turned over and prepared to slide down the edge of the sofa with his bulging belly. What are you doing? Yang Yi had to hold his little hand and carry him to the ground. But he still kept a close eye on him. He was afraid that the little boy would not notice and bump his head. After all, the space in the plane was very small. He. Tong Tong did not answer his father. He giggled and walked down the aisle. Then, he threw himself between his sister's legs. He put one hand on his sister's thigh and the other hand on the seat. Little brother, sit with me. She bent down excitedly and reached out to carry Tong Tong. Actually, the word carry could not be used because they were both children. From the looks of it, Shi's action of carrying Tong Tong looked more like she was pulling him by force. But it didn't matter. Little Momo finally climbed up and sat on the same seat as her sister. Shi and Lon Xin could not sit together, but Tong Tong's butt was very thin. He and his sister could barely sit side by side in this small seat. After they sat down, Shi smiled and winked at Lon Xin from across the aisle. Tong Tong looked at his sister and giggled for a while. Then, he smiled at his father from across his sister as if he was showing something to his father. I want to go over too. Lon Xin could not hold it in anymore. She muttered softly and jumped down from the seat beside Yang Yi. Then, she ran over to Shi's seat. Now, the 3 little ones were all sitting on the other side, while Yang Yi was left alone on the other side. Chapter 1082. Although the 3 little guys were playing together on the plane, they didn't make too much noise, and they wouldn't go to other seats. At most, they would stay in their own little world, pointing and giggling inexplicably. Maybe it was because there weren't many first-class passengers on the plane. Yang Yi saw that the noise didn't affect others, so he just reminded them when they didn't pay attention and their voices began to rise. Most of the time, he didn't deliberately suppress their nature of playing. It took 3 hours to fly from Jiang City to Chengdu, so when the plane arrived at Chengdu, it was nearly 11 o'clock, and the night was dark. Tong Tong was tired after playing with her sisters on the plane, so she curled up in her father's arms and fell asleep early. Shi and Lon Xin also yawned. The 2 girls were used to sleeping early, so they were very tired. If it weren't for the excitement of traveling, they would have fallen asleep on the plane. Come on, Shi. Dad doesn't have so many hands to take care of. You hold Xin Air's hand. Xin Air, you have to hold Shi's hand. You 2 sisters, don't let go. Yang Yi held Tong Tong in one hand and Lon Xin and Shi in the other hand, walking out of the passage. Behind him were 3 men in black suits, carrying bags and dragging suitcases. One was his personal assistant, and the other 2 were bodyguards. These were the standard domestic equipment that Mo Shaowan usually arranged for him. If he was in Harbor City or abroad, he might be equipped with more bodyguards. In addition, I have to mention this by the way. After returning from Harbor City this year, Mo Shaowan realized that Yang Yi's identity was different from before. No matter whether Yang Yi kept a low profile or not, he and Murphy needed some professional bodyguards to escort them when they attended activities. And they couldn't hire temporary bodyguards in a hurry like in Harbor City, right? Therefore, Mo Shaowan began to recruit a group of full-time bodyguards in the name of the Hua Yi Brothers Company. Yang Yi also went to his old comrade-in-arms and old leader, Luo Zongxing, for help. Luo Zongxing had now officially retired from Battle Wolf. He held a relatively high military position in the Southwest Military Region. Coincidentally, there were a group of retired soldiers in the Southwest Military Region this year, and the Southwest Military Region also had a headache about the problem of placement. Yang Yi's needs, so Luo Zongxing selected 10 veterans with good skills and good character for him. Although there were no retired Special Forces soldiers from Battle Wolf, they were all treasures. After retiring from Battle Wolf, they were usually hired to be instructors in the Southwest Military Region or even other military regions. Yang Yi was an exception. These 10 people were also the best among ordinary soldiers. After special training from the instructors of the bodyguard company, they also mastered the skills and qualities that bodyguards should have. Of course, the 10 bodyguards were not all arranged for Yang Yi. In order not to waste resources, sometimes when Guazi, Yang Huan, or Chenli Chuanshu attended more complicated events, Mo Shaowan would also arrange 1 or 2 bodyguards to follow them. In comparison, Yang Yi and Murphy used bodyguards less often because they participated in fewer public events. Then again, although Yang Yi did not like ostentation, he had so many children with him this time. He would not feel at ease if he did not bring a few people with him. Moreover, now that the whole country knew about his net worth, it was necessary to bring some bodyguards with him when he went to other cities. After all, no matter how good Yang Yi's skills were, he was only good at himself. There would always be things that were inconvenient for him to take action or things that he could not take care of. As soon as he stepped out of the terminal, he saw a large group of fans and reporters surrounding him. The 2 bodyguards reacted quickly. They just glanced at each other and skillfully handed the push-pull suitcases to their assistants. They spread out their arms to protect Yang Yi and the 3 children. Although he did not know that his whereabouts were exposed so quickly, Yang Yi was fine. He was used to these situations. He paused for a moment and let go of Lon Xian's hand to wave at the fans and reporters. Thank you, everyone, for welcoming me so warmly. Chengdu is a very beautiful and friendly city. After Yang Yi put down his hand, he did not hold Lon Xian's little hand. Instead, he pulled Shi and Lon Xian to his side and said loudly, "However, I'm sorry that I can't interact with everyone tonight, nor can I accept any interviews from the reporters. As you can see, it's very late and the children are very sleepy. I'm really sorry." After that, Yang Yi smiled and nodded to the crowd. Then, under the protection of his bodyguards and assistants, he walked out of the airport and got into the car that was going to pick them up. Most of Yang Yi's fans were more rational. After listening to Yang Yi's gentle explanation, they stopped in their tracks. However, there were still some fans who desperately tried to squeeze in. There were also many reporters who did not care about what they said at all. Some of them held their cameras and hurriedly followed, pressing the shutter crazily. Some of them shook their microphones and shouted their own questions, wanting to interview Yang Yi. Fortunately, Yang Yi's 2 bodyguards were very helpful. Although the 2 of them looked a little weak, with the help of the airport security, they still protected Yang Yi and the others and made it not too crowded. It was not until the black nanny van slowly drove out of the airport and onto the road that the crowded crowd gradually disappeared from Lon Xian's sight. It was the first time that she had encountered such a big crowd, so she was very nervous. Not to mention that she had been holding onto Yang Yi's trouser legs tightly just now. Lon Xian had been leaning on the window to look back after getting into the car. "Papa Yang, why are there so many people?" Lon Xian asked with some lingering fear. "Because..." Such a simple question, Yang Yi found himself stuck. How should he answer? Should he say that he was too famous? That he was a big star? At this time, she interrupted her father's words. The little girl first yawned, then a little lazily muttered to Lon Exon, "Oh, it's all like this. Because many people know my papa, so when they see my papa and mom, they will call their names." Can too famous be explained in this way? Yang Yi looked at she with interest and nodded with a smile. Then I don't want to know so many people. It's too troublesome. Lon Exon shook her head hard and said. After Lon Exon finished speaking, she couldn't support her tired body anymore. She fell to the side and leaned on Cece's body. "Oh, Exon, you are too heavy." Although she was very sleepy, she could not help but protest loudly. Although Yang Yi left the airport, the photos of him with the 3 children were still on many reporters' cameras. There was nothing strange about Shi and Tong Tong, but the reporters were very curious about who the little girl standing next to Shi was. Could it be that Yang Yi and Murphy had a 3rd child? No, this child was much older than Tong Tong. If it was Yang Yi and Murphy's child, then it should be the 2nd child, and Tong Tong should be the 3rd child. But it was impossible. Shi and Tong Tong looked a little like Yang Yi and Murphy, and Lon Exon. Although she was also a pretty little girl, judging from her body shape, they should not be a family. So the question was, who was this little girl that they could not ask at the airport? Why was she next to Yang Yi and received such considerate care from Yang Yi? Chapter 1083. When Yang Yi got back to the hotel last night, it was already very late. When he woke up early this morning, he realized that the 2 girls were still sleeping like pigs. Interestingly, because Shi and Lon Exon were sleeping on the same big bed, their sleeping positions were Lon Exon hugging the quilt and Shi sleeping directly on the other side of the quilt. One of her legs was even placed on Lon Exon's chubby little butt. Perhaps it was because her feet felt better. After Yang Yi got up, he pulled Shi's leg down and pulled the quilt over her. As for Lon Exon, he pushed the little girl away as if he was pushing a piece of wood. He let her change back to her normal sleeping position and then covered them with the quilt. They arrived at the hotel very late last night, so the 3 children did not take a shower. Lon Exon and Shi were at least asked by Yang Yi to go to the bathroom to get a towel to wipe their faces and arms. After that, they washed their faces and brushed their teeth before going to bed. Tong Tong slept directly until the next morning. But no matter what, it was a little unhygienic to not take a shower. Therefore, Yang Yi grabbed Tong Tong, who had woken up early and had been kicking his legs and playing with his feet. He raised the little guy with both hands and giggled because he found it very interesting. Yang Yi went to the bathroom to take a shower. As for Shi and Lon Exon, it was not their turn yet, so Yang Yi let them sleep a little longer. Mo Fei also couldn't get up, she was still sleeping. In fact, Murphy did not sleep well last night. She was already very tired from the rehearsal. In the hotel, she had to force herself to keep her eyelids open and wait for Yang Yi and the others to come to help take care of the 2 little girls. She had to toss and turn until very late last night. Just now, Tong Tong had woken her up. Yang Yi felt sorry for his wife, so he took Tong Tong to take a shower and let Murphy sleep a little longer. After an unknown amount of time, Shi, who was in her sleep, felt that the world was falling apart, especially when there was a tremor right in front of her face. The little girl was so scared that she immediately woke up from her sleep. He. Little Momo's complacent laughter drifted into her ears, causing Cece, whose mind was a little muddled, to gradually come back to her senses. She struggled to raise her fluffy and messy little head, squinting her sleepy eyes as she glanced at little Momo, who was propping herself up with both hands. She pouted her little mouth and let out a long groan. She was like a little pig, not awake at all. Of course, this snort also seemed to be a protest. "Little brother, why did you disturb your sister's sleep?" Tong Tong, on the other hand, was immersed in his joy. He chuckled and wanted to share it with his sister. Xiang, sister. Tong Tong stretched out his little arm towards his sister's nose and said with a smile of exultation. He had just taken a shower, so he was only wearing a pair of shorts and a small t-shirt. Naturally, a large part of his arm was exposed. His father was rummaging through his luggage to find diapers for him to wear, as he still had to take off his pants later. However, Tong Tong, who was being carried to his sister's big bed by his father, was restless. His sister was still sleeping, so he could not wait to wake her up. She was still unhappy when she was woken up. When she heard her brother showing off, she muttered with a slightly nasal voice, "It doesn't smell good. It smells bad." Tong Tong widened his eyes in surprise. He had unwavering trust in his sister, so when he heard her say that it smells bad, he quickly retracted his hand and tried to smell it himself. "It doesn't smell bad." Therefore, he stretched out his hand again and said seriously, No, it doesn't smell bad. It smells good." Yang Yi walked over with a pair of diapers. When he saw this scene, he could not help but laugh. He rubbed Shi's little head and said, "All right, sister, hurry up and get up. While you're at it, wake up Xian Air as well. You two go to the bathroom to take a shower. After that, we'll go eat delicious food and see the pandas." When she heard that they were going to see the pandas, she quickly woke up from her state of lazing around in bed. She hugged the quilt and sat up. She squinted her eyes, which were still unable to open, and combed her messy hair with her claws. Lon Xian was still sleeping next to her. Perhaps she was dreaming about the delicious food that Yang Yi mentioned just now. She smacked her lips. "Papa, where's Xiang Xiang?" Tong Tong was still immersed in the topic that he had just discussed with his sister. Although he was pressed down on the bed by his father to put on a diaper, he still tried to raise his little arm and pouted his little mouth to let his father smell it. "Yes, you smell good. Sister was wrong. She's the stinky one. She didn't take a shower last night either," Yang Yi said with a smile. When she heard this, she immediately became unhappy. She got up from the bed and leaned over to hug her father's shoulders. Her soft little body pressed against her father's arm. She shook her little but unhappily and shouted, "That's not the case. Little brother is the stinky one." See, she became energetic after messing around for a while. Although Yang Yi specially got up early, it was already past 9 o'clock when he left the house after taking care of the 3 children in turn. Murphy didn't go out with him. Tonight's concert would be held at 11 o'clock. She still had to go to the concert venue to practice with the invited singers. Yang Yi didn't need to rehearse. He only needed to sing one song in Chengdu. When they met in the stadium in the afternoon, he just needed to do a sound check. "Remember to eat breakfast. I'll take them out to play." Before Yang Yi went out, he ordered the hotel's breakfast to be served and placed on the table. He reminded Murphy, who still wanted to stay in bed for a while. Murphy hugged the quilt in the same position as Lon Xian just now. However, her white long legs were exposed, which made her more charming. Hearing Yang Yi's nagging, she raised her head. Her beautiful eyes revealed a trace of happiness and she sweetly said, "Okay. We're going to eat delicious food." Lon Xian shouted. In the elevator downstairs, she and Lon Xian started a fierce discussion about the purpose of today's visit. "No, we're going to see the pandas. My papa said yesterday." She shook her head. "But he also said that we're going to eat delicious food." Lon Xian said unhappily, If we don't eat delicious food, how can we? I haven't eaten breakfast. I'm starving." How could they have the strength to see the pandas without delicious food? She blinked her eyes and said with some confusion, But we don't have much time. Papa said that we're going to Mom's concert in the afternoon." Yang Yi saw that their discussion had fallen into a misunderstanding, so he said with a smile, "We're going to eat delicious food first, then see the pandas. Don't worry, there are 2 good restaurants in front of the hotel. Let's try the famous delicacies in Chengdu and fill our stomachs. Then we'll take the bus to the place where the pandas are." "See, I told you there would be delicious food." Lon Xian was overjoyed. She said to she proudly, "Because we haven't eaten breakfast. It's just that your mother didn't eat delicious food. She wants to eat in the hotel. The hotel's breakfast is not delicious." "All right, but I want to see the giant panda as soon as possible." "Brother too." "Brother, Do you want to see the super cute giant panda? Cece turned her head and looked for her ally in her father's arms. Tong Tong opened his round eyes and looked at his sister. He found that his sister was talking to him, so he immediately laughed happily. Pandas. She emphasized this word in front of her brother. Her big eyes were full of expectation, and she wanted her brother to repeat it. Tong Tong thought that his sister was talking about Xiao Guai. They were all cats, so why did she have to make it so complicated? He clapped his hands excitedly and shouted, "Meow, meow." Hey, it's not meow. It's not a cat, it's a panda. A panda is very big. She cried anxiously. Chapter 1084. The food in Chengdu cannot be separated from the word spicy. However, not all of them were spicy. For example, Yang Yi had to sing tonight, so he couldn't eat anything that would irritate his throat. Therefore, he brought the children to this century-old shop that sold tofu pudding. After leaving the hotel, they still encountered the problem of being surrounded by fans. The enthusiasm of the fans in Chengdu was beyond Yang Yi's expectations. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that there were not many concerts scheduled in the southwest region. Many fans had come from other places or even other provinces. Luckily, Yang Yi had the experience of last night. Today, he asked Mo Xiaowan to arrange a few more bodyguards for him to protect him all the way to the tofu pudding shop. There's a private room upstairs. Be quiet. The owner of the tofu pudding shop was very considerate. When he saw the celebrities bringing their children over, he knew that this was a living advertisement. He immediately extended his hand to invite them upstairs and vacated the tea room that he usually used to entertain his friends. One must know that this time-honored tofu pudding shop couldn't be considered luxurious. It was basically a hall. The so-called private room was just a small room upstairs. However, this wasn't bad. At least it was clean and tidy. The tea set had been moved away by the owner. What do you want to eat? Yang Yi took the menu and smiled as he asked Shi and Lan Xian to look at it together. The two little girls, one on each side of Yang Yi, held onto Yang Yi's arm and stared at the menu. It has to have a lot of meat. Lan Xian muttered as she looked at the menu. But it doesn't seem like there's any meat. There's meat. There's beef tofu pudding here. Shi's eyes were very sharp. She stretched out her slender arm and pointed at a line of words on the menu. Then, she turned her head and said to Lan Xian, "That's right. Beef tofu pudding." When Lan Xian saw the word beef, her eyes lit up. She excitedly said, "Daddy Yang, I want beef tofu pudding." You want beef tofu pudding? Yang Yi looked at the small chili symbol at the back of the menu. He smiled and said, "This is spicy. Can you eat spicy beef tofu pudding?" Spicy? Lan Xian's response was a little slow. At this moment, her little head was filled with the word beef. How could she care about anything else? Anyway, she just had a confused look on her face. On the contrary, she reacted faster. She quickly grabbed her father's arm, shook her head, and said, "No, don't eat spicy food." She seemed to dislike this shop when she heard that there was spicy food. Indeed, she didn't like spicy food when she was young, but Yang Yi was still going to let her practice. He might forget about it today, but he had to try spicy food tomorrow no matter what. He had grown up and should improve his tolerance. He had to try all kinds of sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy food. Otherwise, wouldn't he miss out on a lot of delicacies in the world? The boss was standing at the side with a small booklet. When he heard Shi's words, he hurriedly explained, Yes, we have non-spicy tofu pudding. For example, this brown sugar tofu pudding and this ice-drunk tofu pudding can be made non-spicy. Also, our signature Yi'er Pao is also filled with meat, and it's not spicy. This kid should like it. Lan Xian hurriedly nodded her head. Ice-drunk tofu pudding? It's filled with alcohol? Kids can't eat it, right? Yang Yi lightly raised his eyebrows and asked. It's not filled with alcohol, but with mash. It won't make people drunk. The boss hurriedly explained. However, he looked at the three kids and hesitated for a moment before saying, "But, if you have concerns, it's fine if you don't let the kids eat it. After all, there's still some alcohol in it. You can order the brown sugar tofu pudding." The boss looked at Yang Yi anxiously as he explained. He was worried that Yang Yi would be unhappy after looking at the menu and leave. "Can you put less chili in the beef tofu pudding? Or can you make it non-spicy?" Yang Yi asked. Customers who came to Chengdu to look for non-spicy food were usually looking for trouble. In Chengdu, or even the entire Sichuan province, which restaurant didn't serve spicy food? This shop even provided non-spicy tofu pudding, which was rare. If it was any other customer, they would probably be despised. But facing Yang Yi, the boss could only carefully explain, "This is more difficult because our beef is specially marinated, so it's spicy." "Okay then, give me 1 serving of ice-drunk tofu pudding, 3 servings of brown sugar tofu pudding, and 2 servings of the one with meat filling." Yang Yi didn't mind and said, "Daddy Yi." The boss helped to add, "Yes." Yang Yi smiled and nodded his head. "I'll start with these. Also beef tofu pudding." Lon Xian, who was listening attentively at the side, immediately shouted, "How could they leave out the beef? This is spicy." Yang Yi smiled and looked at Lon Xian. She also chimed in, "Yes, spicy food doesn't taste good. I want to eat. Lon Xian pulled Yang Yi's arm and looked at Yang Yi with her pleading eyes. "All right, add another serving of beef tofu pudding. The rest are the same." "I don't think she can eat this beef tofu pudding." Yang Yi smiled and said to the boss. After ordering the dishes, Yang Yi asked Shi to help take care of the tong tong. He walked out of the private room with the boss and called for the bodyguards sitting on the second floor to order something to eat. Then, Yang Yi called for a bodyguard and asked him to go to the shop next door to buy a few servings of baked egg cakes for him. "It's probably going to be hard for us to go out now. Later, arrange for a car to come over. After eating, we'll go straight to the giant panda base." Yang Yi took out his wallet, took out a few red bills, and said to him, "Also, this baked egg cake, if you like it, you can buy more." The tofu pudding shop served the dishes very quickly. After a while, bowls of tofu pudding were brought in. The big white porcelain bowls were filled with white tofu pudding. The brown sugar tofu pudding was a brown sugar juice that looked like soy sauce. Yang Yi's iced drunk tofu pudding was much lighter. It was a clear white soup that looked like ordinary tofu pudding. There were clear grains of glutinous rice floating in it and 2 red goji berries. Obviously, this iced drunk tofu pudding was much better looking. Cici and Lon Xian both liked its appearance very much. They pulled their stools over and began to watch it while making a big fuss. Tong Tong was also attracted by their movements. He hurriedly came over and tried to squeeze between his father's legs. "MMM," he said, asking his father to pick him up and look at it. "You can't eat this. It tastes a little like alcohol." Yang Yi smiled. "Papa can't eat it or drink it either." She seriously protested when she heard that. Perhaps it was because Murphy had repeatedly mentioned that she was disgusted with smoking and drinking. She had hated smoking since she was young, and she started to resist drinking because of that incident in the past. She had been influenced by what she saw and heard, so she also had a deep-rooted dislike for these two things. She felt that these were not good things from the bottom of her heart. "This isn't alcohol. It just tastes a little like alcohol," Yang Yi explained. "You can't eat it, you can't eat it." She's delicate brows furrowed. She pouted her small mouth and shook her head vigorously. "Papa, I don't want you to drink. I'll be very sad." When the little girl said this, her expression was very serious. Moreover, there was a hint of indescribable sadness in her tone. It seemed that if her father really ate it, she would be very disappointed and really sad. Yang Yi reluctantly looked at the ice-drunk tofu pudding, which was still emitting a bit of white cold air, and sighed. He pushed it to the side and said, "Okay, then I won't eat this." The little girl's delicate little face immediately revealed a happy expression. She happily said, Papa, I'll eat my brown sugar tofu pudding with you. I'll share it with you. She had counted before. The tofu pudding on the table was actually 1 serving per person. Yang Yi couldn't help but laugh. He was somewhat moved and said, "It's okay. Your little brother definitely can't finish a bowl of tofu pudding. Moreover, we have a lot of other things to eat later. If it's still not enough, Papa can order more. Then, little brother and I will share some for Papa." She said enthusiastically. At the side, Lan Xian seemed to be a little taciturn. In fact, that wasn't the case. She couldn't be bothered to listen to the conversation between Shi and Yang Yi. She didn't even care if she could eat the ice-drunk tofu pudding. Her eyes were fixed on the waiter who had just pushed the door open. A big bowl of tofu pudding covered with large pieces of beef was being served. This was definitely added because Yang Yi's face was brushed on it. Although there was still a daunting red soup and red chili floating on top of it, a thick meaty aroma was already wafting out. Although the spicy aroma was very strong, this spicy aroma was able to stimulate one's appetite before one ate it. The thick and stimulating meaty aroma was like an invisible hand that grabbed onto Lan Xian's stomach. The little girl swallowed her saliva. Her round eyes shone brightly. It was as if there was an explosive rock background music playing. Nothing can stop your yearning for beef. Chapter 1085. Excluding the ice-drunk tofu pudding and the other tofu pudding that Yang Yi didn't order because of its spiciness, there really wasn't anything special about the tofu pudding made with brown sugar. After all, there wasn't much difference between tofu pudding and tofu pudding. Although they weren't the same type of food, there was only a slight difference in the degree of solidification and the texture was slightly smoother. The so-called brown sugar tofu pudding wasn't much different from tofu pudding with sugar water. She had this question in her mind. She scooped up a spoonful of the tofu pudding and tasted it. Then, she looked at her father in confusion and asked, "Hey, Daddy, isn't this tofu pudding? We've eaten it before." However, little mommy liked it very much. Perhaps it was because it was sweet and tasted good, but after eating a small spoonful, his eyes narrowed in joy. His 2 little hands waved a little, and then he asked his father to give him another spoonful. Lan Xian was competing with a plate of beef tofu pudding. The little girl raised her chopsticks and wanted to eat to her heart's content. Shi, who was beside her, grabbed her hand in panic and shouted, "Xr, no, it's super spicy." Shi looked as if she had seen poison. She pointed at the chili oil floating on the surface of the beef tofu pudding and shouted, "Xr, look, it's all spicy. Chili, chili, chili. It's all chili. It's very, very spicy." Lan Xian was a little hesitant. She pouted and looked at it for a while. Then, she twisted in her seat and said with a little hesitation, But I want to eat the beef. "But it's very spicy." She pressed her little hands on her knees and looked at Lan Xian worriedly. "But I want to eat beef." The 2 little girls both had their own insistence. Lan Xian repeated the same thing over and over again. "If you want to eat it, then try it. If you don't try it, how will you know if you can handle it?" Yang Yi stood at the side, holding a bowl, and smiled at them. "Also, there are some good things that are not so easy to obtain. If you want to obtain them, you have to overcome some difficulties." While Yang Yi was talking, Tong, who was sitting on the chair next to him, was getting impatient. He reached out his little hand and grabbed his father's wrist. Not to mention the Tong, Lan Xian sniffled as if she had smelled the scent again. She finally made up her mind. "I'll give it a try." She couldn't stop her. She sat at the side and looked at her little friend worriedly. Lan Xian picked up a slice of beef with her chopsticks. She knew how to eat very well. She picked up the beef and tossed the other chopped onions, ginger, pepper, and other ingredients to the side. Then, she directly stuffed the thinly sliced beef into her mouth. The beef was very chewy, and it tasted especially good in the mouth. Lan Xian craved this taste. Once she chewed, she felt as if her whole body had been sublimated. Her eyes narrowed comfortably. It seemed to be delicious. She blinked. She was so focused on Lan Xian that she even forgot to eat her own tofu pudding. Spicy beef. The first word to describe it was fragrant. Lan Xian first felt that she was eating very well. Then, the spiciness came up to her like an assassin in the dark. Lan Xian's eyes, which were originally squinting comfortably, wrinkled up as if she had been bitten by a bug. It wasn't that both of her eyes were wrinkled. Her eyes were wrinkled more on one side, and the other side was different. It was a little asymmetrical. Spicy. Lan Xian couldn't stand the spiciness. She jumped down from the chair and jumped on the ground. But she didn't scream. They hissed and gasped for cold air, and then hopped around noiselessly. Because she was still chewing the beef in her mouth. It was indeed spicy, but the taste was actually quite good. Lan Xian chewed and felt that with every bite, the rich flavor of the beef would surge out. How could she bear to spit it out? Yang Yi poured a glass of iced orange juice for Lan Xian. After Lan Xian ate the beef, she drank a few mouthfuls of orange juice to barely relieve the spiciness. But after the commotion just now, the little girl's face was red from the spiciness, and her forehead was sweating. Is it very spicy? She asked with concern. Lan Xian nodded. Sigh, I told you not to eat it. She said. Lan Xian recovered and regained her spirit. Her eyes were watery. She didn't know if it was because of the spiciness, but she looked very lively. She giggled and said, but it's also very delicious. But you were about to cry from the spiciness. She didn't believe her. It's really delicious. The spiciness is also very delicious. Lan Xian didn't know if she was trying to be brave or really felt that way. She anxiously jumped in front of she and shouted. Actually, it was quite uncomfortable to be hit by the spiciness just now. Lan Xian didn't dare to continue eating the beef. Instead, she turned her head and drank her brown sugar tofu pudding. However, after eating the brown sugar tofu pudding and tasting the yerba with meat filling, Lan Xian still couldn't forget about the beef. She bit the yerba with non-spicy yerba, but her eyes were fixed on the big piece of beef. How could the pork taste as good as the beef? Finally, under the stimulation of her appetite, Lan Xian gathered her courage and reached for the bowl of beef tofu pudding for the second time. This was a scene that Yang Yi and she didn't notice. That was because she felt that the tofu pudding didn't taste good. She was eating the yerba with one hand and pushing the bowl of tofu pudding to her father with the other hand so that he could eat it. It wasn't until Lan Xian shouted that it was spicy and drank the orange juice that Yang Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at this gluttonous little girl. Just give it a try. If you don't like the spiciness, don't force yourself. Yang Yi comforted. However, when Lan Xian turned her head around, she didn't have an uncomfortable expression. She licked her red lips and said to Yang Yi with a serious expression, "No, it's really delicious." With the second piece of beef, there was a third piece, a fourth piece. Lan Xian seemed to have a better tolerance for spiciness. Although she was still gritting her teeth and sweating profusely from eating, Yang Yi saw that her eyes were very clear and that her excitement didn't diminish. The beef is super delicious. Lan Xian didn't only eat by herself, but also chewed as she strongly recommended it to Shi. But it's spicy. When Cici saw Lan Xian eating so happily, she actually wavered a little and said hesitantly, "It's fine. It's not spicy anymore. Shi, let me tell you, you can drink this ice juice. It's super delicious, and then it won't be spicy anymore." Lan Xian said with a smile of exultation. Perhaps sometimes, the advice and encouragement of peers is more effective than the persuasion of parents. Sometimes it's a positive effect, and sometimes it's a negative effect. Let's look at the positive side here. Therefore, although Shi was afraid of spicy food before, when she saw how excited Lan Xian was, her originally firm heart wavered again. Why don't you do the same as Xian and try it first? Yang Yi saw this and said encouragingly, "Maybe now that you've grown up, you'll feel differently about spiciness." When Lan Xian heard that she was going to try her beef, she was a little unhappy. However, when she thought that it was she, and that there was still a lot of beef left in the bowl, and that she was a little full from drinking the orange juice, she finally felt at ease. Okay, she, you try it too. After Lon Xian thought it through, she generously pushed the bowl over. With the encouragement of her father and friends, she finally plucked up the courage to pick up her chopsticks. Tong Tong looked at his sister in surprise. He seemed to be able to hear the difficulty of this challenge. Although he was full and had no appetite, the little guy still stared at his sister with his big eyes as she picked up the beef. From Tong Tong's perspective, his sister hesitated for a long time before biting the beef between her teeth. However, her reaction was different from Lon Xian's. After a few bites, she felt the rising tide of spiciness. She frowned and spat it out. It's so spicy, so spicy. She frowned as she drank the orange juice and breathed in through her small mouth that was numb from the spiciness. Oh, you can't spit it out. Lon Xian felt that it was a waste. Don't you think it's delicious? With the iced drink, she felt better after a while. She nodded gently, pouted her small mouth, and said, It's delicious, but it's spicy. I don't think it's as delicious as my papa's. Yang Yi saw she's improvement. He rolled his eyes and saw that she had poured half a cup of cold water into a cup. Then, she picked up a piece of beef and rinsed it in the cup. Immediately, a layer of red oil floated in the cup. Yang Yi smiled as he put the washed beef into she's bowl in front of her and said encouragingly, Here, try it. It may not be so spicy. Is it really not spicy? She asked curiously. It's definitely spicy, but didn't you try it just now? It's not a big deal, isn't it? You can rest for a while and feel better. Isn't that right? Yang Yi smiled and said, Then it's not as spicy as before. Maybe you can eat it. Try it and see if it's as delicious as Xian said. Lon Xian was very good at learning when it came to eating. When she was still hesitating, she hurriedly picked up a piece of beef, rinsed it in the cup, and then stuffed it into her mouth. She also ate the beef. This time, she didn't have to go through a mental struggle like before. Yes, it's quite delicious. This time, Cici finally smiled joyfully, revealing her curved eyebrows with a smile. Although it was still a little spicy, she felt much better after washing it. She only took a small sip of the drink. However, Lon Xian didn't think so. She savored it carefully, shook her head vigorously and shouted, No, it's not delicious. It's still better spicy. Our Xian's attitude towards food was really strict. Chapter 1086. After it was exposed that Yang Yi was the boss of Micro Broadcasting or Backwave Technology Company, Han San was in the limelight for a period of time in the entertainment industry. Some of the self-media summits also sent him invitations. He even gained a lot of benefits by relying on this influence. However, the good days were short-lived. Han Sen did not take the opportunity to expand. He was still a lone wolf. There were not many eye-catching reports, and he quickly disappeared from everyone's sight. On Saturday morning, Han Sen, who liked to stay up late, woke up around 11 o'clock. With a head of messy hair like a bird's nest, he rubbed his eyes while sitting in front of the computer. He browsed Weibo, some news websites, and fan forums to see if there was anything new in the entertainment industry. Yang Yi. Originally, a news headline that was not particularly popular entered his field of vision. When Han San saw the familiar name, he could not help but feel refreshed and read it attentively. The content of the news was nothing special. It said that Yang Yi arrived in Chengdu last night to attend Murphy's concert. However, he brought 3 children with him. In addition to Shi and Hua, who were more familiar to everyone, there was another child whose identity was unknown. Of course, the editor of the news still wrote a wonderful story. After all, it was an entertainment report, so naturally, it had to be written with suspense and ups and downs. He even hinted vaguely that this little girl might be the illegitimate daughter of Yang Yi and Mo Fei. Only by hinting vaguely would he not have to take responsibility. However, Han San was an industry insider after all. Naturally, he would not easily believe this kind of argument. When reading a report, he would at most look at some objective descriptions and photos taken by others. He would directly skip over the subjective assumptions. After Han Sen smiled disdainfully, he fell into deep thought. Who is this little girl? I can see that Yang Yi takes good care of her. Han Sen touched his chin. He felt that there was news to be found. Of course, Han Sen's tool of exploration was micro-broadcasting. After all, he also relied on micro-broadcasting for a living. Opening Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting homepage, Han Sen was surprised to see that Yang Yi had actually updated a micro-broadcasting article this morning. Bravely try to eat spicy food. Today, I came to Chengdu in Sichuan province, a beautiful city where people love spicy food. Under Xin Air's encouragement, Shi, who had never eaten spicy food before, bravely tried spicy beef. Although she was not as good as Xin Air's ability to adapt to spicy food, Shi's courage today, encouraged by Xin Air's encouragement, was worthy of praise. However, when I saw the way the two little girls were jumping around due to the spiciness, I couldn't help but laugh. Ha ha ha. It was just an ordinary speech with a picture of a plate of beef tofu pudding. But Han Sen couldn't help but feel refreshed. He felt that he had found the answer. This Xin must be the chubby little girl, Han Sen said. She must be the chubby little girl. Of course, he still had to find the answer in the comments. The micro-broadcasting article that Yang Yi had posted more than an hour ago already had more than 10,000 comments. Father-in-law, why did you post a picture of Shi's micro-broadcasting with a dish? No. We want to see Shi. We want to see Shi whose lips are red because of the spiciness. Unsurprisingly, the top trending comments were similar. Han Sen was used to these people calling Yang Yi father-in-law every day. He paid more attention to the more substantive comments. For example, the following comment made Han Sen perk up. Xin Air can also eat spicy food? She grew up with Shi in the same environment, but Xin Air can eat spicy food better than Shi. I didn't expect this. Xin Air? Xin Air also went out to play with Shi? In the past, every time Yang Yi made delicious food, Xin Air would be very supportive. She can eat spicy food so well today. Maybe she can't resist the temptation of delicious food? Haha. This netizen's comment unexpectedly revealed the truth. Han Sen touched his chin. He felt that these two comments should be from Yang Yi's old fans, and they should be the kind of hardcore fans who have been following Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting for a long time. He often watched Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting, but he couldn't remember where he had seen the name Xin Air. Fortunately, under the micro-broadcasting's homepage, he could search for this person's previous posts. Han Sen typed Xin in the search box. Soon, the relevant content popped up. Hey, there are quite a few. Han Sen was surprised to see that Xin Air's name appeared under Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting. Although the frequency was not high, there were still more than 10 posts. The earliest post could be traced back to 2 years ago, and the last post was just over a month ago. She was still planting vegetables with Xin Air. From the micro-broadcasting, it could be seen that Xin Air was not a relative of Yang Yi and Shi. She and Shi were probably neighbors, or even classmates. This is interesting. They were classmates from kindergarten to elementary school, and they are so close. Moreover, Yang Yi was willing to bring her along with his daughter. Han Sen felt that it was necessary to investigate this little girl's identity in depth. Han Sen was good at finding gossip from a large amount of information. This was not only because he was tenacious, but also because he had a very sharp sense of touch. Now he felt that this inconspicuous little girl might have some news to dig up. Not to mention the excited Han Sen, Yang Yi, Shi, Tong, and Xin Air, who had eaten and drunk to their heart's content, got into the car to the panda base after he posted on Weibo. After eating a few pieces of spicy beef, Shi's little mouth was still a little red. Of course, she had already passed the state of blushing from the spicy beef. Her face had returned to its usual white color, but her little mouth was still a little red. However, she still looked very cute. She could not wait to see the pandas in the car. She was moving around energetically. At this moment, she could not help but stand up from the chair. She hugged the headrest of the second-row seat with her two little hands and said excitedly, "Papa, can I take my camera?" "Do you want to play now?" Yang-yi did not drive. They were now in an MPV nanny van with a bodyguard in the front. Yang-yi sat in the second row so that it was convenient for him to take care of Tong Tong, who was sitting in the child seat in the second row. Shi and Lan Xian sat in the third row. There was a passage in the middle of the second row of the nanny van. If necessary, Yang-yi could go to the back to take care of the two little girls. Yes. She quickly nodded and explained, "Because I want to play with the camera first. Otherwise, I don't know how to take pictures of the pandas. I haven't played with the camera for a long time. The last time I played with it, I took pictures of my radish." Yang-yi smiled and patted Shi's fluffy little head. He said, "Okay, Papa will get it for you. Sit down and fasten your seat belt. You can't take off your seat belt by yourself. It's not safe." I know." She sat back down obediently. Yang-yi took out the camera from the backpack on the ground and handed it to Shi. Soon, Shi and Lan Xian played in the back. "Xian, sit down. Sit down first. I want to take pictures of you. You have to smile. You can't close your mouth. Oh, you blinked." Lan Xian also shouted, "Let me see." Shi, you don't even know how to take pictures. They don't look good. No, this one is gone. Let's do it again." While the two little girls were arguing, they arrived at the panda breeding research base. Chapter 1087. In the park, please be mindful of the volume of your voices. It's not that we don't allow you to speak, but what we mean is, please don't make any loud noises or make any sharp noises. Does anyone know why this is? At the giant panda breeding base, Yang-yi, along with his 3 children and a few other families with children, were listening to the base's expert tour guide explain the rules and regulations of the tour in the lounge. They originally wanted to hire a professional tour guide, but because it was the weekend, there were a lot of tourists who came to see the giant pandas, and the base did not have enough professional tour guides. Seeing this, Yang-yi did not insist on any special treatment. He led the children to be treated like normal tourists and received the services of a 20-person tour guide. However, this kind of service was not bad. Shi and Lan Xian stood beside the other children and listened to the tour guide attentively. It was just like a normal class. Not only was it lively, but it also gave them a sense of participation. Tong Tong was originally being carried by his father, but he felt that he was not free enough in his father's arms, so he asked his father to put him down. Then, he squeezed himself between Shi and Lan Xian and let the two sisters hold his hands. Perhaps it was because of the unfamiliar environment, but Shi and Lan Xian, the two children who were good at talking, turned their heads to look around at the same time when the tour guide asked them questions. Lan Xian was looking to see who was going to answer, while Shi was eager to try, but she was a little shy and did not dare to raise her hand. Because giant pandas need to sleep too. At this time, a younger boy who looked to be about 5 years old plucked up his courage and raised his head to speak. "That's right." The tour guide smiled and clapped her hands. She looked at him encouragingly and continued, "Because giant pandas like quiet environments and are very sensitive to noise. If we make too much noise, they will hide. That way, we won't be able to see the giant pandas, right?" Cece widened her big eyes in surprise and looked at the tour guide very attentively. It seemed that if Yang-yi gave her a pen and paper at this moment, the little girl would have to write down all of this. After listening to the explanation, they got on the long electric sightseeing bus and followed the tour guide to the giant panda's sun delivery room and the giant panda's infant villa. The lesson that the tour guide had given to Shi and the others was very effective. Shi and Lan Xian began to whisper on the sightseeing bus. They didn't even need Yang-yi to promise them a big ice cream. "Xian, I forgot to tell you that when pandas were small, they were very, very small." Shishi held the camera and looked very excited, but she whispered to Lon Xin in a very low voice. Actually, there was no need to speak so softly. However, Lon Xin also abided by the rules. She was also very interested in the giant panda. Just like Shishi, she listened very carefully. At this time, she seemed to realize that her voice was too loud, so she went directly to Shishi's ear and whispered to her, "I know that you have giant panda dolls at home. Some are big, and some are very small. You used to call them de xiong." After being exposed, Cici felt a little embarrassed and twisted in the seat of the battery-powered scooter. Then, she tried her best to change the topic. "No, it's not like that. Papa showed me a photo. It's really small. Oh, you'll know when you see it later." The two sisters were chatting in full swing in the car. Tong Tong was also a little unwilling to be left out. He stepped on his father's leg shakily and moved his body towards his sister. "Sister, please play. Daddy didn't give it to him." Little Minglan was still anxiously squeezing Daddy's arms around him, muttering as he pressed forward. Yang Yi helplessly picked him up and sat him down. Then, he whispered in his ear, "We don't have many seats. Sit tight, or you'll fall off." Fortunately, the electric car was very light, and they soon arrived at the place where the giant panda cubs were bred. Tong Tong also got what he wanted. He could hold his sister's hand and walk with her. Why didn't he like to walk with his father? It was because it was hot to be hugged by his father, and he was not free. His sister's height was just right for him to hold his little hand, so he felt as safe as his father. Moreover, Shi treated Tong Tong very well. Lon Xian was a little impatient with holding Tong Tong's hand all the time, but Shi was still very considerate and gently held her brother's little hand in her palm. Fortunately, because of the tour guide's explanation, the group didn't walk very fast. Although Tong Tong was short and had short legs, his small steps were compact, so he could still keep up with everyone's pace. After turning a corner, Shi's eyes suddenly lit up. She hurriedly held Lon Xian's hand and didn't dare to say anything. She just pursed her lips and smiled happily. "Look." Thus, the two girls moved closer to the glass partition and looked curiously. When the tour guide in front saw that everyone had walked over, she said, "This is the room for the baby pandas that were born less than a month ago. Of course, they usually have to stay by their mother's side and be taken care of by her." The tour guide was still talking when she suddenly felt a tug on her sleeve. She looked down and saw a girl with neat bangs and braids. The tour guide's first impression of her was that she was pretty, especially her big bright eyes. Even though she was looking at her anxiously and frowning slightly, her big bright eyes were still very beautiful. She didn't have to guess to know that this girl was Shi. She still lowered her voice and said anxiously, "Sister, you can't talk too loudly." When the tour guide heard this, she smiled and said, "It's fine here. Our room has double-layered soundproof glass and there are some soundproofing settings inside, so we won't disturb the baby pandas when we talk here. When I said not to talk too loudly, I meant that when we go outside and see the pandas in the activity area, we'll just have to keep our voices down. Of course, you're also great for thinking of taking care of the baby pandas." She suddenly understood. She smiled shyly and blushed. She turned her head and ran back to her father's side, continuing to hold Tong Tong's hand. But everyone is lucky because last Tuesday, a mother panda called Curly gave birth to 2 baby pandas. Because... The tour guide continued and explained why everyone could see the baby pandas in this place. The children listened attentively. When they heard something interesting, they even gasped in surprise. Tong Tong was held by his sister's hand. He learned from his sister and looked at the tour guide attentively. Of course, he didn't understand. This was because when the tour guide said that if twins were born, the mother panda would choose to take care of the stronger panda cub and abandon the weaker one, regardless of whether it lived or died. At this time, Tong Tong, who was listening attentively like his sister, didn't reveal the same shocked expression as his sister. He also didn't show the seriousness of a crisis. He still looked around in confusion. The little guy's confused expression seemed to be asking, "Why are you making such a big fuss over nothing?" Chapter 1088. It turned out that the keepers at the giant panda base had secretly stolen a baby panda when its mother, Curly Wan, wasn't paying attention. Then, they arranged for the baby panda to be taken care of by its mother. That was why she and the others had the opportunity to see the newborn baby panda. It's really small. Lon Xian stood in front of the glass partition and looked at the baby panda sleeping soundly on the small quilt. Obviously, she really didn't expect the baby panda to look like this. It was only about the length of an adult's palm. Yeah, I've seen pictures of the baby panda. She stood beside her and stared at the baby panda. Since there was no restriction on her voice, she could speak freely. However, the young lady was still reluctant to speak too loudly. It was as if even the slightest movement would disturb the baby panda's sleep. She realized something. She was a little excited, but she suppressed her voice and whispered, Xer, look, the baby panda is moving in its sleep. Oh, it's true. It's moving its legs. Lon Xian nodded happily. Little Momo was too small. Even if he stood on his tiptoes, he still couldn't reach the height of the wall. However, when he saw that his sister and the others were chatting animatedly, and he didn't know what they were looking at that was so interesting, he became anxious. Sister. Tong Tong grabbed his sister's arm with one hand and tried to squeeze his body between his sister and the other. He even tried to step on his sister's foot with his little shoe, as if this could increase his visibility. Hua, I want to see. She was pushed back by him. However, the young lady understood her brother's intention. She enthusiastically reached out and hugged Tong Tong's armpits. She tried to lift Tong Tong up so that he could see the baby panda. Big sister, will carry you. Then, you can watch. She's labored voice reached Yang Yi's ears. Yang Yi looked down and couldn't help but smile. However, she's efforts were in vain. Soon, she helplessly put down the Tong Tong and complained, little brother, you're too heavy. How can you eat so much? You weren't this heavy before. This was different from last night when she carried Tong Tong onto the chair. At that time, she was sitting on the chair and had to drag Tong Tong onto the chair. Now that she was carrying Tong Tong, it was naturally more tiring. Let Daddy do it. Yang Yi smiled and bent down to pick up Tong Tong from the ground. This way, little Momo could finally look at the baby pandas with his sisters. He curiously stuck his head out to look while grinning from ear to ear. He was very happy. What are you laughing at? Yang Yi smiled and scratched the little guy's nose. Didn't you abandon Daddy and only want to play with big sister? Tong Tong ignored him. Humph, childish. Looking at the baby pandas was quite interesting. Even after leaving the nursery, she and Lon Xian couldn't help but chatter about how the baby pandas didn't have dark circles under their eyes and thick black hair circles like their mother. Daddy, why do you think the baby pandas look like that when they're born? She and Lon Xian's discussion was fruitless, so they simply ran over to their father and asked curiously, they don't look like their mom and daddy at all. Because they don't look like them. They're so small. Lon Xian said matter-of-factly. That's not it. When I was young, many people said that I looked like my mom. She retorted with a pout. Yang Yi listened to their argument and laughed happily. Well, this world is very strange. Many animals don't look like their parents when they're young. Look at the baby frog. Aren't they just tadpoles when they're young? Of course, there's also a possibility that when the baby pandas were born, their mother ran out of ink, so they don't look as black as they do now. She ran out of ink. She and Lon Xian both looked at Yang Yi in surprise. Yang Yi nodded seriously. Then let's go buy some ink and help it darken a little. Papa, is that okay? Cici said kindly. Haha. Of course, Yang Yi was just joking. After a while, she and Lon Xian were led by the tour guide to see a few baby pandas that were between 30 and 60 days old. Their questions were also answered. The baby pandas at this stage were obviously more adorable. Not only were they round and no longer looked like little worms, but they also had black circles and a black back. The only difference between them and a normal panda was their size. It was worth mentioning that she and Lon Xin also learned an interesting piece of information. Auntie. A child ran over and asked the tour guide seriously, Auntie, may I ask why the baby pandas are called baby pandas? Of course it's called baby pandas. Because it's a baby. The tour guide didn't understand what he meant at first. That's right. I think it should be called little panda. Because it's a baby. My mom also calls me Xiao Ming, but my name is Ming Ming. The child explained naively. She and Lon Xin heard the commotion and looked over curiously. In fact, they had the same question in their hearts. The tour guide laughed and said, I see. But I want to tell you a little bit of information. If someone asks you this question in the future, you can proudly tell them that you know why. The Battle of Titles was all kinds of open and covert attacks. The child didn't understand and even nodded happily. Why don't we call the baby pandas little panda? That's because the giant panda is the name of its entire species. It's just like how we call cats cats and dogs dogs. Giant pandas are all called pandas regardless of whether they're big or small, male or female. But red pandas are different. Red pandas are another type of animal. She listened attentively, her eyes shining with excitement. I learned something new again. Hurry up and write it down. I'll tell Mom when I get back tonight. Mom can't even come to see the pandas. What a pity. The baby pandas are really cute. The little girl thought to herself. But it's okay. I took a picture of the baby pandas. While playing, she could still think of her mother who was working. Would Murphy cry tears of joy if she knew that her daughter was so sensible? The tour guide snapped her fingers and smiled. All right, next to our Panda Sun delivery room, there's an area for little pandas to move around. Let's go take a look now and see what the little pandas look like, okay? Okay. There were quite a number of children in this 20-person tour group, and they all screamed in joy. Cece and Lon Xin were still rather reserved, but the few little boys beside them were all jumping in joy. Chapter 1089. To everyone's surprise, the red panda was very popular among the children, especially when they saw its beautiful reddish-brown fur with white fur in its ears and cheeks. What was even more beautiful was its fluffy tail, which had circles of white rings spreading out like water ripples. Wow! It's so beautiful! It's so cute! When they saw these petite and exquisite red pandas, the children exclaimed one after another. At this time, the tour guide raised a finger and shushed them. She lowered her voice and said, Here, we have to keep our voices down. Look, there are red pandas sleeping on the trees. Perhaps the previous training had worked, but the little ones didn't dare to make a sound. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She just had a new discovery and wanted to say it out loud. She held it in and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She pulled her father's hand and motioned for him to come over and listen to her whisper. Yang Yi squatted down and bent down. She squeezed in front of her father. Her left hand was still holding Tong Tong, but her right hand was on her father's shoulder to support him. Then she lowered her voice and whispered, Papa, look at the red panda. Yang Yi nodded and smiled, indicating that he saw it. Doesn't it look like a little squirrel? She said, her beautiful big eyes shining with excitement. Like a little squirrel? It doesn't look like it. Yang Yi said with some surprise as he looked over again. He looked carefully, but he didn't think that the red panda looked like a squirrel. Its body shape, face, fur color, and so on were all very different from a squirrel. It looks like it. She pouted unhappily. She twisted her little butt and muttered, Papa, look at its tail. It's so cute, just like a little squirrel's tail. Yang Yi understood. He changed his way of thinking and sighed with emotion at the children's unconstrained thoughts. Then he said with a smile, Well, this is indeed a relatively similar place. You can take a picture of the red panda and then go back and think of a short story. For example, the red panda and the little squirrel met on the road, and they both felt that the other's tail was very similar to theirs. Then a series of interesting episodes will be triggered and written in your diary. Shishi's eyes lit up and she nodded vigorously. I also want to tell this story to Mom. Shishi muttered happily as she picked up the camera in her hand. Tong Tong's hand was released by his sister. He was still looking at the red panda, but when he turned around, he saw his sister take out the camera. Shishi had taken a lot of photos of Tong Tong today. Tong Tong raised his right hand almost reflexively and raised 2 fingers. However, Shishi wasn't taking photos of him. Moreover, Shishi didn't even notice her brother's peace sign. She fiddled with the camera excitedly and aimed it at the red panda lazily basking in the sun on the tree. Yang Yi was overjoyed when he saw this scene. He simply took out his phone and turned on the camera. He smiled and said, "Come, come, come. Sister won't take photos of you. Daddy will take photos of you." It was the concert from that year, but it wasn't in the same city. Fortunately, it was still the same people from that year. Hee hee, you have a romantic encounter. I want to post it on micro-broadcasting and WeChat. No way. Zhong Zhenjun, I'm going to kill you. On the campus of Sichuan University in Chengdu, a pair of beauties were sitting under the shade of a tree in an open-air milk tea shop on campus. They were chatting and laughing as they fought over their phones. However, unlike the beautiful students in Sichuan University, they weren't university students. Chu Fongfong and Zhong Zhenjun were playing the role of tourists. Almost 3 years ago, Murphy held a concert in Shanghai. They were still third-year students at Shanghai University of Technology, so they bought tickets and went in to listen to the song. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, the two of them had changed a lot. Chu Fongfong stayed in Shanghai for her postgraduate studies, while Zhong Zhenjun went to Yongqing. Of course, she also had a passionate relationship that made her sad. At the end of last year, when Murphy released a new album, Zhong Zhenjun broke up with her boyfriend and went to Yazhou in Qionghai to relax. Ever since she listened to Murphy's album, Zhong Zhenjun felt that she should go to Murphy's concert again. She talked to Chu Fongfong, who was still her best friend, and the two of them hit it off and made a decision. Unfortunately, Murphy was no longer the unpopular Murphy from before. She was the new heavenly queen of the Chinese music industry. Although she used technical means to limit scalpers from inflating the price, it was still difficult to get a ticket. Especially for the Shanghai station that was held before, Zhong Zhenjun was surprised to find that the tickets were all snatched up in the blink of an eye. Zhong Zhenjun had no choice but to try her best to get tickets for every concert. Finally, at the Chengdu station, she got tickets for both her and Chu Fongfong. One person could buy at most 2 tickets. They couldn't wait until the Yongqing station. Maybe there would be no tickets then. Fortunately, they were all students. Although they sometimes had to do experiments, it was still relatively easy for them to apply for leave. Moreover, it was not bad to come to Chengdu. It just so happened that they could also travel and see the beautiful scenery of the southwest. It was the same today. The concert was at night. During the day, Chu Fongfong and Zhong Zhenjun went to Sichuan University to stroll around. In the afternoon, they planned to go to Jinli Ancient Street and Wuhou Temple. However, what was interesting was that when they were drinking milk tea and resting just now, Chu Fongfong was hit on by a boy. Although Chu Fongfong declined the other party, Zhong Zhenjun felt that this was something worth laughing at. We sisters still have the charm, and there are actually little boys who are fascinated by us. Naturally, Chu Fongfong didn't agree. The two joked around for a while before they quieted down. Hey, Fongfong, look. The micro-broadcasting that Yang Yi just sent is so interesting. Zhong Zhenjun pointed at the phone excitedly and showed it to her friend. Chu Fongfong leaned over and looked at the phone screen. She read it out loud. You stand in front and look at your sister. Sister stands in the high place, looking at the little panda. You think that you are decorating other people's scenery, but they don't have you in their viewfinder. What a sad story this is. Ha ha ha. This was the second time that Yang Yi had adapted someone else's cliffhanger. Although the adaptation was very bad and it was obvious that it was done in a hurry, the content was still very interesting. The three ha-ha-ha-s were not Chu Fongfong's own laughter, but Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting habit. Of course, this time there was a photo. Both Chu Fongfong and Zhong Zhenzhen saw that in the photo taken by Yang Yi's phone, she was holding the camera and taking pictures of things in front of her, but Tong Tong was standing in front of his sister. Oh, he's so cute. Look, he even put up a peace sign, thinking that his sister is taking pictures of him. Chu Fongfong laughed happily. Yes. Zhong Zhenzhen also laughed. I feel that Tong Tong is so pitiful, but I still can't help but want to laugh. By the way, what time is it now? Yang Yi just came last night, and this morning he took the child out to play. Chu Fongfong's thoughts jumped a bit, and she suddenly thought of the concert tonight. What about the concert tonight? Is he not going to sing tonight? I don't know, but I think that Yang Yi will attend. From what I remember, he has never missed any of Murphy's concerts, and he also knows that everyone is attending Murphy's concert because of him and Murphy at the same time. The guest of honor is the Iron Yang Yi. Zhong Zhenzhen held her chin and tilted her head as she spoke. It's hard to say. There are quite a few celebrities who came to sing for this concert. One of them is the first season champion of China's Top Voice, Su Lu, and I'm teacher Su Linglong. Who knows, Yang Yi might not sing. Chu Fongfong guessed. I don't care. Zhong Zhenzhen shook her head and said coquettishly, I just want to hear Yang Yi sing, and he and Murphy are going to sing together. If he doesn't sing, I'm going to boo him. Chu Fongfong pursed her lips and smiled, then said, Hurry up, tell him on micro-broadcasting, he might still be looking at his phone. Chapter 1090. Many netizens who were paying attention to the concert in Chengdu were asking if Yang Yi would be singing tonight, but at this time, Yang Yi had already thrown his phone into his pocket. He was going to the bamboo restaurant in the giant panda base with the children. There was a famous bamboo banquet to try. Before Yang Yi came, he had heard about the unique delicacies in this scenic area. This time, naturally, he went because of the reputation. Why so early? It was only 11 o'clock, and they were already going to eat at the restaurant? Because this restaurant was too popular. According to the netizens' guides, if they didn't go early, there might not even be a seat in the main hall, let alone a private room. When it came to food, Lon Xian was very interested. After getting off the electric scooter, she ran in front and asked, Papa Yang, what is a bamboo banquet? Are we going to eat bamboo like the giant pandas? No, the bamboo that the giant pandas eat is hard. We should eat bamboo shoots, bamboo fungus and the like. Yang Yi explained, it's soft. You should have eaten bamboo shoots before, right? Bamboo fungus is slightly different. It's a fungus, a kind of mushroom that grows on bamboo. Bamboo shoots. Bamboo fungus? Lon Xian looked at Yang Yi with some confusion. She didn't quite understand, but since her father said it was delicious, she was willing to try it. But if we eat the bamboo, won't the giant pandas have no bamboo to eat? She asked worriedly. Don't be afraid. The giant pandas have a lot of bamboo to eat. They can't eat all of it. Yang Yi laughed. Look at them. They eat too much bamboo, and then they don't exercise. They just lazily bask in the sun all day. You can help them eat some, and you can help them lose weight. She liked this explanation very much. She shook off her sadness and said with a smile, I know, I can help Xian eat more and help her lose weight. Lon Xian immediately protested, No. I don't want to lose weight. Yang Yi was amused by their conversation. After laughing, he shook his head and said, I don't need your help. Xian has been exercising a lot recently. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to save 4 gold coins, right? Besides, if you help Xian eat, what if you get fat? Yes. Lon Xian felt that this saying was very much in line with Zhen, so she beamed with joy and nodded her head. Then I'll help my brother eat. She rolled her eyes. Thinking of her increasingly serious brother, she had an idea. Tong Tong hadn't been paying attention earlier and had been looking at the swans in Swan Lake. Now that he heard his sister calling him, He turned his head around with an innocent look on his face. The bamboo restaurant was indeed worthy of its name. The interior decoration of the entire restaurant echoed the theme of bamboo and pandas. For example, the brown bamboo reliefs on the walls and the support pillars were wrapped in green and smooth ceramic. They were protruding into the shape of bamboo. Of course, Yang Yi had booked a small private room. After they sat down, a waiter came over with the menu not long after. Shi and Lan Xian were very curious about what kind of dishes could be made with bamboo. Therefore, when their father finished making milk powder for Tong Tong and was about to order the dishes, they dragged their chairs over, climbed up, and looked at the dishes together. As expected, Lan Xian asked the question she was most concerned about: "Is there meat? Is there a lot of meat?" Actually, Lan Xian was asking Yang Yi this question, but the waiter next to them recognized Yang Yi. She enthusiastically answered, "Yes, there is meat in many dishes. For example, our pineapple sweet and sour pork, kung pao bamboo fetus, stir-fried pork with fresh bamboo shoots, kidney bean sauce beef brisket, stir-fried pork with bamboo shoots, stir-fried twice-cooked pork with bamboo shoots, etc. They all have meat in them." She was quite fluent in naming the dishes. Perhaps she learned it from a crosstalk class. However, these dishes all had meat in them. Especially when she heard the twice-cooked pork, Lan Xian thought of Yang Yi's delicious twice-cooked pork and couldn't help but swallow her saliva. Pineapple sweet and sour pork, kidney bean sauce beef brisket. Yang Yi followed the waiter and read out a few names. Then he looked up and asked curiously, "Are these dishes special here? Does it also belong to the bamboo banquet?" The waiter, who had just taken notes, casually replied, "No, these are just the home-cooked dishes provided by our restaurant. As for the bamboo banquet, because there are only a few of you, I don't recommend ordering the bamboo banquet directly. The portion is too large, and it would be a waste if you can't finish it. You can order some of the more special dishes in the bamboo banquet, such as mountain pepper bamboo cover, bamboo mushroom slippery shrimp, pickled pepper bamboo mushroom eggs, bamboo tripe fried eggs, crab bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo bird's nest, bamboo feast assorted dishes, etc." She quickly listed a bunch of dishes, and then she remembered that she had just asked the customer to order less. She said with some embarrassment, "Of course, I mainly recommend bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs, crab and bamboo bird's nest, especially the bamboo bird's nest. Although it's called bird's nest, it's actually a relatively rare fungus. It tastes like bird's nest, and it's very fresh and tender." Perhaps she wanted to try hard to show off in front of Yang Yi, so the waiter still introduced a lot of dishes. Yang Yi was very polite. After listening patiently, he smiled and said, "Well, you can cross out what I just said. Since we're here, we won't order any home-cooked dishes. We'll order the bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs you just mentioned." Yang Yi ordered a few dishes, and Lan Xian listened attentively. She didn't want to take the menu and look at it by herself like Shi, so she paid attention to what Yang Yi ordered. But after listening for a while, she became a little anxious. These are all without meat." Yang Yi had no choice but to cross out 2 special dishes and order 2 dishes with meat for her, such as the bamboo stir-fried twice-cooked pork that Lan Xian couldn't forget. "This is a little spicy," the waiter kindly reminded them. Just now, Shi also asked if some of the dishes were spicy. "It's okay, I can eat spicy. This morning, I ate spicy beef." Lan Xian stuck out her small chest and said proudly. The waiter was really a good person. She pursed her lips and secretly smiled, and then explained again, "Actually, what we said is a little spicy. Maybe for some of you travelers who don't eat spicy food, it's very spicy." Yang Yi couldn't help but want to laugh. He shook his head and said, "It's okay, just order. It's just right for them to try spicy food. It just so happens that there are non-spicy dishes. If they can't eat it, they can change." The waiter gently nodded and didn't persuade anymore. "Do you need anything else?" Yang Yi nodded and said, "There's no need to order food here. Help me order the bamboo tripe with scrambled eggs and the crab and bamboo bird's nest. Pack it up. Can you help me get a good insulated lunchbox?" Money is not a problem, because I'll take it with me when I go back in the afternoon. Obviously, this was ordered for Murphy. Yang-yi heard that these two dishes had high nutritional value and tasted good, so he was thinking about it. No matter what, he had to bring one for Murphy. No problem. The waiter smiled and said, but actually, I have a suggestion. Because the crab and bamboo bird's nest are soaked in the soup for a long time, the taste will be a lot worse. Do you want to change it to bamboo bird's nest pot? It's like a piece of soft pancake, and it tastes good. Okay. Change it to this. Yang-yi nodded. Then that's it. Thank you for your trouble. However, she still had something to say. She anxiously took her father's hand and said, Papa, there's also big ice cream. Yes, there was still the big ice cream that Yang-yi promised on the plane yesterday. When he got off the plane, he said that she and Lon Xian were both very good, and they would eat big ice cream when they went to see the pandas today. Ice cream was not only liked by Lon Xian, but also by she. If it weren't for the fact that they couldn't eat in the park, in fact, it was just that they couldn't litter or feed their own food to the pandas, she misunderstood, she would have pestered her father to eat ice cream. Yes, let's eat ice cream first. Lon Xian felt that when she asked this question, the whole room was bright, and she also clapped her hands happily. Do you have ice cream in this restaurant? Yang-yi saw that the two girls were looking forward to it, so he turned to ask the waiter who stopped. We don't have ice cream here. The waiter hesitated and said, but the Panda Cafe next door has ice cream. We can call them and ask them to send it over. Yang-yi nodded and said with a smile, okay, thank you. Then, the waiter changed several times. Everyone found an excuse to pour tea, change the water, and even bring ice cream. The ones who came were the two blushing waitresses from the cafe. Yang-yi didn't reject them and signed for them generously. Time to eat ice cream. When there were other people around, Cece was still a little reserved. Now that the door of the private room was closed, the little girl cheered and pounced on Lon Xian. I'll eat the strawberry-flavored one, and you eat the vanilla one, okay? Lon Xian had already opened the lid, secretly dipped the ice cream with a small spoon, and licked it with her tongue, looking satisfied. However, Lon Xian was caught in a dilemma when it came to the choice of flavor. She hesitated for a moment before saying, but I also want to eat strawberry and vanilla flavors. Hey, that won't do. You have to choose one, because one of them is mine. She said. It would be great if I could eat two. Lon Xian sighed and looked at the ice cream ball in a small paper bowl like Haagen-Dazs, and said with some difficulty. To be honest, these two ice creams weren't big, but in front of delicious food, they forgot the difference between size. No, eat two, or you won't be able to eat later. Yang-yi shrugged and smiled. Make a choice. Next time I'll eat another flavor. Although the ice cream ball could be cut, Yang-yi felt that it wasn't easy to cut it. Instead of dividing it unequally and causing a conflict, it was better to let her learn how to make a choice. In life, how could there be so many perfect things? Well, I'll eat vanilla. She likes strawberry. Lon Xian finally made a difficult decision and reluctantly pushed the strawberry to she. Of course, her eyes were still constantly darting around, as if she was afraid that others would see her reluctance. It's okay, I'll let you taste it. You can eat 2 spoonfuls. She thought for a moment and said. Lon Xian's face lit up and she said generously, then you can eat 2 spoonfuls of mine. Like this, we can taste different flavors. Yang-yi gently raised his eyebrows and looked at the two girls who were sitting together and whispering. He didn't expect that they would find a solution to the problem themselves. The two sisters were eating happily, and the way their eyebrows were dancing made little Momo, who was only holding a milk bottle and drinking milk, feel moved. He stuffed the milk bottle into his father's hand and then walked over to the chairs where his sisters were sitting. The little guy first raised his head for a moment, then pressed on his sister's thigh and looked at his sister with pleading eyes. Sister, I want it too. He wants it too. Lon Xian looked over and said vaguely with a wooden spoon in her mouth. Then little brother should try it too. She turned her head and looked at Tong Tong. Then, she took her small spoon and scooped a piece for Tong Tong, just like what she did at the coffee shop. However, compared to last time, Tong Tong only had one sister. Now he had two sisters. Lon Exine saw that Tong Tong was eating happily, so she was generous and said, "Hey, come here, I'll give you a spoonful too. Sister, this one is vanilla." Since there was a sweet and cold ice cream to eat, Little Swan and I was naturally very happy. He ran in a circle and ran towards the ice cream. "But there's only one spoonful here, there's no more." Lon Exine let Little Tao Wu have a small spoonful of ice cream, only to discover that Little Tao Wu was still smacking his lips as he looked at her with a smile. She looked at the small amount of ice cream left in her little bowl, and was instantly struck by a sense of crisis as she hurriedly shielded her little bowl with a pout. Actually, it didn't matter because after they finished the ice cream, there were many bamboo shoots and dishes that looked, smelled, and tasted good. No one was hungry this afternoon. Instead, because of these fresh delicacies, Cece and Lon Exine's appetites were greatly stimulated. Both of them ate until their stomachs were bulging, and they yelled that they would come again next time. Time passed by slowly. Gradually, night fell, and there were already people waiting outside the concert venue to enter the venue to watch the concert. However, in a dark little room, someone was angrily tapping on the keyboard. "Breaking news! Breaking news! Breaking news!" Han San was flustered and exasperated, and he cursed. Han San spent so much time today, crazily investigating the little girl's identity. Finally, a few minutes ago, he found the little girl's information through the contacts of several people who Yang Yi followed, and after a whole day of micro-broadcasting, his eyes were almost blind. However, just when he was overjoyed, thinking that he had unearthed some incredible information and was about to organize the clues and information so that he could expose it at night, Han San was shocked to discover that there was a gossip media account that had already revealed Lon Exine's identity before he did. "Do you think Yang Shi is the richest 7-year-old girl?" "Wrong. It's the unremarkable fat girl beside her who is the one." A very gimmicky title. There was nothing wrong with the content. An employee of Lanzhou Kai's company anonymously disclosed to this media account for a fee. He even provided a candid photo of Lanzhou Kai bringing his child to the company, pointing out that Lon Exine was the daughter of Lanzhou Kai, a shareholder of Sahara Online Mall and a real estate tycoon who had been in the headlines a few times recently. The shares of Sahara Online Mall should be more valuable than Backwave. After all, the profitability was not on the same level. Lanzhou Kai also had a real estate company worth billions, while Lon Exine was an only daughter, and she had a younger brother. The gap in value seemed to be able to be distinguished. This news had been crazily reposted by other media outlets. But this glory originally belonged to him, Han Sen. How could this not make him crazy? How could it not make him crazy with jealousy? However, Han Sen's eyes were red, and he still sat back in his chair, thinking angrily, "No, there must be more information here. This time, I won't be slower than anyone. Give me back everything that belongs to me." Chapter 1091. Unknowingly, it was already late into the night. Murphy's concert in Chengdu was already in its second half. For some reason, Zhong Zhenjin, who was particularly excited tonight, held Chu Fengfeng's hand and screamed, cheered, and sang along with Murphy. Her voice was almost hoarse from all the shouting. At this moment, Murphy had just finished singing her last song. She held the microphone in her hand and said in her clear and pleasant voice, "Actually today, I know that you've all been looking forward to the appearance of someone." Hearing her say this, the audience below the stage boiled over. Zhong Zhenjin was also very excited and shouted Yang Yi's name along with the audience. Why were they so excited? Because before the concert began, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Zhong Zhenjin was eating while browsing micro-broadcasting on her phone. In the end, she saw a new micro-broadcasting from Phoebe Studios' official website. "I don't know if my salary will be deducted, but today, the official broadcaster can't hold it in any longer. I want to secretly tell everyone that the fans who bought tickets to the concert in Chengdu are in luck. That hot man and the lady boss have secretly prepared a big surprise for you all. Hee hee, you know what I mean. What surprise? What other surprise could there be? Zhong Zhanjun knew that Yang Yi and Murphy had never cared about the rules of the entertainment industry, nor did they play their cards according to the routine. When others released a song, they would record the album, do some publicity, start selling it, and then participate in a chart-topping program. But they didn't care. Publicity? None. A chart-topping program? They might participate, but they might also not. Records? Up until now, they had only released 2 major records and a small special, so they didn't care about the sales of their songs. From the fans' point of view, these 2 were mavericks. If they had good songs, they would directly throw them out to the fans on the program or at the concert. Of course, the fans were more willing to see them do this. After all, this was also a benefit. From this micro-broadcasting, it was very likely that Yang Yi would bring a new song tonight. Moreover, he would be singing with Murphy. How could Zhong Zhanjun and the others not be excited? Back at the concert, Yang Yi walked up leisurely from backstage in a black slim-fit suit under everyone's cheers, forming a sharp contrast with Murphy's white dress. Murphy also did not go backstage as everyone expected. Instead, she stood sideways with both hands holding the microphone in front of her. Her eyes were filled with joy as she looked at Yang Yi and watched him approach step by step. Yang Yi rarely wore a suit when he went on stage, but it had to be said that he was handsome in a suit. That pair of long legs was enough to cover up the flaws of his masculine, but not handsome enough appearance. What's more, wasn't the charm of a mature man a reflection of his handsomeness? After Yang Yi came up, he naturally took Murphy's hand and the 2 of them walked to the front of the stage at the same time. After exchanging a few pleasantries with the audience, Yang Yi cut to the chase. Actually, songwriting is a very contradictory thing, because a songwriter can't be limited to one kind of theme, and can't only look for inspiration from his own experience. Because once you restrict your own thinking, your creation will soon reach a dead end, and you won't be able to produce any wonderful works. The fans below the stage laughed and cheered excitedly because they felt that since Yang Yi mentioned this, he must be bringing a new song. But why do I say it's contradictory? Yang Yi smiled and said, because when I wrote some songs about the love between Murphy and me, some people would say that it was a bit boring to listen to sweet love songs every day. They still prefer to listen to songs like Listen to the Sea, that have a bit of meaning. Although I don't quite understand what the meaning of meaning is. He spread his hands and the fans below the stage burst into laughter. So, for Murphy's album last year, I specially wrote some sad songs. Some of the inspirations for these songs came from some reports or examples in life, and some were completely constructed out of thin air. It was like shooting a movie, fantasy, looking for inspiration. Yang Yi's tone was a bit helpless. When the album came out, the response was very warm and very popular, but many fans were very concerned and worried about whether there was a problem with my relationship with Murphy. They said that after listening to the new album, they couldn't believe in love anymore. In the midst of the laughter, Yang Yi raised his voice a little, cupped his hands and said, "Of course, I appreciate your kindness. But I still hope that you can have a little more expectation for love. No matter what others are like, no matter what setbacks you have encountered, you must believe in the beauty of love." Murphy, who had been standing beside Yang Yi with a smile, nodded at this moment. She raised her head slightly and looked at Yang Yi. Anyone could see the admiration in her eyes for Yang Yi. Although it was not like those little fangirls' eyes that lit up when they saw their idols, the appreciation, love, and indulgence in her eyes made people feel her feelings for Yang Yi. So, although I'm only singing one song today, this song is to be sung with Murphy, and it's a newly written song. I hope it can arouse your beautiful expectations for love. According to the statistics, there are many young friends here. I hope all of you can bravely find your own beautiful love. Yang Yi concluded. Finally, Murphy also raised the microphone and said the name of the song with a smile, a little tempting. I hope everyone can like it. Below the stage, Zhong Zhanjun was so excited that her eyes were filled with tears. She could no longer cheer with the others. She could only wave the light stick with her right hand. Chu Fong Fong was a little calmer. She helplessly had one hand grabbed by Zhong Zhenjun, who also raised it and swayed it. The beautiful prelude led by the piano sounded. Yang Yi raised the microphone, turned slightly, looked at Murphy affectionately, and sang in a slightly high voice, "You and I, men and women, can't escape love. Who is willing to have the courage to give his heart at all costs?" Murphy also raised the microphone and sang along, "You're not just talking about you, but also about myself." Below the stage, Chu Fong Fong and Zhong Zhenjun also listened carefully. Zhong Zhenjun was intoxicated by the song and lyrics, while Chu Fong Fong listened more carefully. While listening, she gently shook her head and sighed. Yang Yi's voice, "There's no one else." No one could hear her sigh because the scene was too noisy. But Chu Fong Fong's sigh was not wrong. She heard that Yang Yi's singing of this song seemed to be very different from the other songs he sang. For example, his voice was much more delicate, unlike the vicissitudes of his singing of "Love of a Lifetime," or the softness of his singing of "Silence is Golden." It seemed that Yang Yi reflected a different type of singing in every song. This kind of singing. Maybe if he went to the I Am a Singer Live, he wouldn't be afraid of everyone? Chu Fong Fong sighed in her heart. It said that Murphy's singing is excellent. Now it seems that there is an even more amazing man behind her. Yang Yi is just too low-key and doesn't want to overshadow Murphy's light. I'm a little tempted by you, but I'm so afraid to look into your eyes. I'm a little tempted, a little hesitant, but I don't believe that I can't help myself. While Chu Fong Fong was analyzing Yang Yi's singing, Zhong Zhenjun was already intoxicated by the lyrics of the song. Especially with the lyrics, Yang Yi and Murphy's perfect evasive and coquettish gazes on the stage made people feel that a strong smell of PDA permeated the air above the venue. But everyone was willing to eat this PDA. Like the other fans, Zhong Zhenjun's eyes were filled with envy and her heart was filled with joy. She couldn't help but cross her hands and hold them in front of her, shouting, I can't take it anymore." Murphy also sang, "A Little Tempted." Then, Yang Yi raised the microphone and sang with her, "It's hard to resist. Oh, the most frightening thing is to fall in love. Although you don't want to see or listen, you still fall in love." This section was originally sung with deep affection. Zhong Zhenjun's sharp eyes saw Murphy reach out her hand and Yang Yi hold her hand at the right time. Actually, love is also very beautiful. At this moment, Zhong Zhenjun absent-mindedly understood the meaning of the song, and also absent-mindedly felt the "a little bit tempting" written in the song. "I can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore." Zhong Zhenjun felt hot all over. She pouted and twisted in her seat. Then, she leaned over to Chu Fong Fong's ear and shouted, "I can't take it anymore. I've decided to die single. I want to find a boyfriend. I don't believe that I, Zhong Zhenjun, can't meet a good man." Chapter 1092. His daughter's identity being exposed was a big deal. Lan Cao Kai rushed back to Zhongqing from Jinling on Sunday. Of course, he did not blame Yang Yi for this. After all, this was something he had expected. Wasn't it normal to be photographed by the media when interacting with a big star like Yang Yi often? He had only come back to Zhongqing to find Yang Yi's professional public relations team to help deal with this matter. My suggestion is that we don't need to hold an additional press conference. The more serious you are, the more willing the media will be to report. Mo Xiaowan received Lan Cao Kai in the company and said, "On the other hand, if we pretend to be deaf and mute and don't respond, we can turn this into a small matter and a small matter into nothing." Lan Cao Kai nodded and said, "That's the effect I want too. Try to minimize the impact." What I said before was just a general approach. As for some inappropriate news between you and Yang Yi, we will also contact the relevant media to delete the posts. Mo Xiaowan said, "However, because this news has caused quite a stir, we need some time to deal with it." Lan Cao Kai waved his hand casually. "I'll leave this matter to you guys. I'm not worried. The sooner, the better." Mo Xiaowan smiled and said, "It's actually easier on your side. Basically, in a few weeks, the news will be over. In the future, it will be very difficult for online users to search for your daughter's information and photos. It's not just micro-broadcasting. Actually, quite a few internet companies have this kind of service in a more discreet manner. It's just that the price may be slightly more expensive. However, the price was not worth mentioning for Yang Yi and Lan Hao Kai. Lan Hao Kai returned to Zhongqing and took a weekend off. Unfortunately, although the weather was hot, his little jacket was still eating and drinking well in Rong City. And she was really eating and drinking well. Daddy, look, we ordered a lot of food. In the afternoon, in the video call with Lan Xin on WeChat, Lan Xin held up Yang Yi's phone proudly. She skillfully turned the camera to show Boss Lan their hot pot tabletop. There was a very large round table with a lot of fresh meat placed on it. What was even more enticing was that there was a quaint-looking big iron pot in the middle of the table. Of course, with Lan Xion's height, she couldn't take a picture of the inside of the hot pot. Haha, is that so? Did your Papa Yang take you to eat hot pot? Lan Hao Kai chuckled. Chengdu hot pot is very famous. Before he could finish, Lan Xian couldn't wait to tell him what was on the plates. Dad, do you see this? This is meat, a lot of fat cattle. A big plate. Lan Xian happily took a picture of the big plate of snowy fat cattle and showed it to Lan Hao Kai. Then she continued to introduce, this is tripe, this is fish, this is called. There was actually something that Lan Xian, who had eaten many delicacies, couldn't remember the name of. She still had a good memory. She remembered when the dishes were served just now. She came over and said excitedly to Lan Hao Kai on the phone, this is goose intestine. Yes. Lan Xian nodded quickly. Lan Hao Kai finally seized the opportunity to speak. He asked, Xer, let me tell you, Chengdu hot pot is very good, but it's very spicy. Can you eat it? Yes. Dad, let me tell you, I ate a lot of spicy beef yesterday. I might have eaten spicy food. Lan Xian turned the camera back to her and shone it on her adorable face. She beamed happily as she told her father about it. Really? You can eat spicy food? Lan Hao Kai was skeptical. At this moment, Shi's little face squeezed into the camera. She and Lan Xian were looking at Lan Hao Kai on the screen. Hearing Lan Hao Kai's questioning tone, the little girl couldn't wait to clarify for Lan Xian. No, Xian can really eat spicy food. I can prove it. The little girl also raised her little arm, as if the camera could capture it. She felt a little awkward saying this, so she reached out to grab the phone with Lan Xian and said, Papa Lan, let me tell you, yesterday, we went to eat tofu pudding. Tofu pudding isn't very delicious, but I really like eating baked egg cakes. I like it too. Lan Xian's eyes lit up and said, because there's meat in it, just like steamed buns. Steamed bun, QAQ, we're different. No, I want to talk about the beef tofu pudding. Fortunately, she still remembered the topic she wanted to talk about. She shook her head and said, there's some beef in the beef tofu pudding, but it's spicy. I don't dare to eat it, but Xin ate it. Hee. Lan Xian leaned against Shi and twisted her shoulders, happily accepting Shi's praise. Perhaps she felt that it was too strenuous to hold the phone, so she let go of her hand and let Shi hold it. This was incredible. Shi held the phone and wanted to express herself freely. This is a very special discovery. Shi, why don't you dare to eat it? Lan Hao Kai's voice sounded. I ate it too. But it's a little spicy, so I didn't eat much. I also had some spicy twice-cooked pork for lunch, but it was delicious. She held the phone and answered as she climbed onto the chair. Of course, the camera also shook. When she was firmly kneeling on the chair, the little girl turned the camera around and filmed their hot pot for Lan Hao Kai to see. Papa Lan, look. Our hot pot is very magical. The middle is not spicy. In the camera, there was a big iron pot. There were many chili seeds, and green onions floating on the dark red bottom of the pot. The boiling chili oil gave people a feeling of violent spiciness. Interestingly, there was a small pot in the middle. It was probably only a little bigger than a palm. There was a non-spicy white soup boiling in it, and there were also green onions and mushrooms floating on it. This small pot was too much. Perhaps they wanted you to come to Chengdu to eat authentic spicy hot pot. At this moment, Murphy's voice came from the side. She, don't film like that. Come down, what if you lose your balance and fall onto the table? Before Murphy could finish speaking, Yang Yi's large hands carried Shishi down from the chair. The little girl had almost pressed her body against the edge of the table just now. Be careful. If the phone falls into the soup, it will burn you. Yang Yi rubbed Shishi's little head and smiled. If you want to film this for Papa Lon to see, you can let me film it for you. Okay. She nodded obediently, but she felt that there was still something she wanted to say. Papa Lon, let me tell you, we can eat spicy food and non-spicy food. Because... She seemed to want to explain the principles of this hot pot to Lan Hao Kai. However, Lan Hao Kai didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw that she was holding the phone. In the shaky camera lens, Lan Xian had already thrown him, her father, to the side. She sat on the chair and excitedly asked Yang Yi to put some beef into her bag. Put it where it's hot. It'll be very fragrant. Lan Xian's high-spirited voice could be faintly heard. Lan Hao Kai sighed and shook his head. After patiently listening to Shishi's story, he let Shishi go to eat hot pot. Okay, when you come back, you can tell me what you did in Chengdu. Now go and eat, I'm starving. He. Then I'll go eat hot pot. Shishi felt that she had said a lot, so she nodded in satisfaction. Lan Hao Kai didn't have his daughter to make noise, nor did he have his daughter to accompany him for lunch. This weekend was a bit boring. Honey, where's Xian Air's homework? Let me check it. I have nothing to do anyway. Lan Hao Kai put down the phone and said casually. Chapter 1093. On Monday, Yang Yi sent Shishi and Lan Xian to school. Not long after they came back, Lan Hao Kai came over with Wu Jingjing. Even Murphy could see the worry between their eyebrows. She quickly helped Yang Yi boil water and make tea. Brother Lon, what happened? Yang Yi frowned slightly and asked with concern. Lan Hao Kai's usual style of doing things was the same as his body shape. He was as steady as Mount Tai. Even if there were any small problems in business or at the amusement park construction site, he could calmly deal with it. He almost never complained to Yang Yi. Today's situation was indeed a bit abnormal. This matter is not a big deal, Lan Hao Kai said with a sigh. However, before he finished speaking, Wu Jingjing next to him discontentedly interrupted. Not a big deal? Shouldn't this kind of thing be taken seriously? I want to say later, it's not a big deal. Lan Hao Kai explained. What the hell happened? Yang Yi was getting more and more confused. Isn't it Xian Air? When I came back yesterday and saw her homework, I was almost dumbfounded. Lan Hao Kai said as he took out his large-screen phone and showed a photo to Yang Yi. Look at this diary she wrote and the teacher's comments. Lan Hao Kai didn't have it easy. He didn't think about how to deal with this matter, so he didn't talk about it. Last night when Lan Xian came back from Chengdu, he didn't mention a word. Now, he was waiting for Lan Xian to go to school before he told Yang Yi about it. At first, Yang Yi thought that Lan Xian was lazy and didn't write in the diary or something else, but when he looked over, he couldn't help but be stunned. This morning, I was hungry and didn't have anything to eat. She also didn't have anything to eat. Fortunately, I was smart. Haha, I secretly ate the biscuits that the class monitor bought for Xiaoya. Xiaoya doesn't eat biscuits, but I think it's delicious. The above was the entire content of the diary. Of course, it was mixed in with various pinyin. This was just the translated version. When he saw this, Yang Yi knew why Lan Hao Kai was worried. Petty thievery was not a good habit. Putting himself in Cece's shoes. Yang Yi felt that Lan Zhao Kai would have been on the verge of breaking down when he read this diary yesterday. My God, you have billions of assets at home. You can have anything you want. You actually stole other people's biscuits because you were hungry? How could Lan Zhao Kai's head not explode? How could Wu Jingjing not lose her temper just now? It was also because of Lan Zhao Kai's calm personality that he didn't hang Lan Xian up and give her a beating when she came back last night. But then again, Lan Zhao Kai was right. This wasn't a big deal. Because children would always make mistakes like this and that, they didn't form a correct worldview. They couldn't be defined because of one thing. Yang Yi glanced at the bottom of the diary. This diary was for the teacher to check. Sure enough, Li Ruolin also responded. She left a line of red words at the bottom. Next time, you can't eat other people's snacks. If you feel hungry, you can come to the teacher. The teacher brought an apple. I can give you half of it. A simple line of words immediately calmed Yang Yi's irritable thoughts. Li Ruolin obviously understood. She also knew that if this kind of thing was handled too harshly, it would bring a shame that the child would never forget for the rest of her life. Perhaps Lan Xian didn't feel anything now. If she grew up and became more sensible, she would remember that she was once called to the teacher's office and reprimanded in front of many people. She understood that she shouldn't secretly take other people's or little girls' snacks. She would probably carry a heavy psychological burden for the rest of her life. Fortunately, Teacher Li didn't do that. I think her comments are very well written and can also solve the problem. Yang Yi explained to Lan Zhao Kai and Wu Jingjing. You see, on one hand, she told Lan Xian that she shouldn't do this. On the other hand, she also encouraged Lan Xian to go to her for help if she has such a problem. She didn't just say that Lan Xian can't do this when she's hungry. She also gave a solution to the problem so that Lan Xian doesn't have to worry about being hungry. If she's hungry, we can ask her to bring something to school to eat. At the very least, she has pocket money in her bag. She can go to the school's canteen to buy food. Why would she want to take other students' biscuits? I really don't know what she's thinking, Wu Jingjing said as she slapped her thigh in annoyance. Sister Jing, don't be so angry. Let's think of a solution together. Murphy saw this and poured some hot tea for her. Drink some tea first and calm down. Let bygones be bygones. Didn't the teacher already help us deal with it very well? We don't need to pursue it too much. Actually, you see, Xian Air usually comes back well. This means that she has already accepted the teacher's guidance and won't do this in the future. Yang Yi laughed. Now that you're angry and anxious, it will make the child feel very scared. This will have a certain impact on her mental health development. That's true. I'm just worried that she thinks that the teacher doesn't take it seriously and that we parents don't take it seriously. She's still carefree in her heart and thinks that it's very smart to do this. What if she encounters a different situation next time? Is she thinking of using this method to solve it? Lan Zhao Kai wasn't as anxious as Wu Jingjing, but he was also very worried. He slowly explained his worries to Yang Yi. Yang Yi couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Lan Zhao Kai's words made sense. Moreover, these words reminded him of a case in a children's education book that he had read before. Although it had been many years, Yang Yi still remembered it vividly. It was about a senior elementary school teacher who found out that student A stole student B's pocket money and spent it on buying hamsters. The process of investigating and interrogating student A was a battle of wits and courage. It was comparable to a criminal case. However, this teacher was very friendly. She didn't want to embarrass student A too much, so she privately gave student A the corresponding amount of money and asked him to secretly return it to student B. Then, student A wanted to use his own pocket money to return it to the teacher. Student A agreed. If this was the ending of the story, then everyone would be happy and satisfied. But later, when the teacher talked about this with student A's homeroom teacher, this teacher was only the homeroom teacher of this class, he was shocked to find out that student A had stolen other people's things more than once or twice. His class teacher had also told him many times and even helped him pay for it, but he didn't change. This kind of thing made the primary school teacher who told this story confused. She felt that she was really doing this for the good of the child, but by doing so, it could be said that she was helping him cover up his mistake. Perhaps, he would feel more at ease and be more unrestrained. Lan Hao Kai's concern just happened to hit the nail on the head. Just as Yang Yi was deep in thought, Murphy also felt that this was a very big problem. She also advised, Yang Yi, help brother Lan and sister Jing think of a way to explain this to Xian Air. Although I think it's a small problem, isn't there an old saying? Small people steal needles, big people steal cows? We have to take this seriously. Yes, Xiaoyang, you're the best at teaching children. Help us think of a way. Wu Jingjing said. Lan Hao Kai also nodded. He and Wu Jingjing sat there, and a gloomy atmosphere filled the air. Yang Yi nodded gently. He continued to think for a while, then slowly said, I still feel that this matter needs to be solved from two angles. First, regarding the matter in Xian Air's diary, we'll follow the teacher's method and not mention it. We'll just let it go. Second, on the basis of not mentioning this matter, let me do it. I'll find Xian Air and Shi and tell them a story. In the story, we'll teach them the principles of how to deal with people, okay? Don't give the children too much pressure. Lan Hao Kai and Wu Jingjing still trusted Yang Yi. After hearing what he said, they felt a lot more at ease and quickly nodded happily. Chapter 1094. In the afternoon, Yang Yi went to school to pick up Shi and Lan Xian. He noticed that there were a few more reporters with cameras outside the school. It seemed that the exposure of Lan Xian's identity last weekend had some impact. However, Shi and Lan Xian didn't seem to be affected. The two girls held hands as usual and ran out of the school gate happily. Then, they ran to Yang Yi's left and right hand, and under his protection, they crossed the road together. Shi didn't feel any pressure at all. After getting in the car, she said to her father with joy, Papa, the teacher knew that I went to see the panda today, and asked me to go on stage and tell everyone the story of the panda. But they didn't believe it. They said that the panda is so big. How could the baby panda be so small? Lan Xian chimed in. Yes, I forgot to bring the photos. I'll bring the photos to show them tomorrow. She said regretfully. Yang Yi smiled and said, Xian Air, didn't you go on stage and tell everyone the story? Only Shi. That's right. Cici nodded. Lan Xian also nodded for a while, then shook her head and said, I don't want to tell a story. Shi will do it. Yang Yi said with a smile as he drove, That won't do. If you don't tell a story, we'll have a bonus event for the half-year anniversary of the opening of the gold coin shop tonight. How can you participate? At this moment, Shi and Lan Xian were both interested. The two girls pulled the seat belts in the back seat at the same time, stretched out their small arms, and hugged the front seat. They asked excitedly, Really? A bonus event? What kind of prize? What kind of event is it? Is it fun? Just like that, the two young ladies chattered and asked questions all the way. When they got home, Yang Yi wasn't in a hurry to organize the event. Instead, he urged them to do their homework. After dinner and walking back, Yang Yi called Shi and Lan Xian to the side hall. Yang Yi had already told the two girls the rules of the event. If they told a good story based on the pictures, there would be a reward. The reward was very generous. It directly surpassed the limit of gold coins and was a substantial reward. This made Shi and Lan Xian very excited. If Xian Air tells a good story, then next month, when we go to Taiwan for a concert, I'll take you with me. There's a lot of delicious food there. Yang Yi smiled and said, If Cici's lecture is good, then Daddy can take you to visit our doll factory and see how those super large dolls are made. Wow! Lan Xian and she screamed excitedly. I want a reward. I want to see the dolls. Papa, can I ask Sister Xiaowei, Fishy, Chi-Chi, Shiyun, and Xiaoyu to come with us? She asked excitedly. Her mind was still very fast. She immediately thought of how to enjoy the reward later. She, can I go with you? Lon Xin felt that the doll factory was also very interesting, so she said excitedly, I can share some delicious food with you too if we go to Taiwan for a trip. Okay. She and Lon Xin laughed happily. However, she still thought of the key point. The little girl said sadly, but I might win because I'm too good at telling stories. Xin, you won't be able to go to Taiwan to eat delicious food. What will you do then? Lon Xin came back to her senses from her longing for the delicious food in Taiwan. In a trance, she realized that her beautiful idea was out of reach. Lon Xin pouted her small mouth and said unhappily, Yes, if I can't go, she, you can only play alone. How boring that is. No one will accompany you to eat delicious food. Yang Yi listened to the thoughts and logic of the two little girls floating around, and he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He clapped his hands gently to attract the attention of Shi and Lon Xin. He said with a smile, Don't think that you will lose. What you should think about now is that I have to work hard to tell this story well and strive to get the prize. This prize is not for just one person. Xin, if you and she can tell the story as well, then both of you will get the prize. At this time, Lon Xin and she looked at each other happily. The two little girls were excited. After explaining the rules, Yang Yi projected 2 4-panel comics that he had drawn himself on the large LCD TV hanging on the wall of the side hall. Of course, the comics were drawn by him during the day. Although it was a little rushed, with Yang Yi's drawing skills, he could fully express the main storyline of the story. After all, Shi and Lon Xin were still young, and they couldn't write an 800-word essay just by looking at pictures. Having a clear storyline was more helpful for them. The first comic was about Su Heng not eating the ownerless pear. Of course, Su Heng didn't exist in this world, so Yang Yi drew this original story. The first panel was about Su Heng and his friend walking on the road. Su Heng's expression showed that he was tired and thirsty. The second panel was about Su Heng sitting under another tree, resting, and his friend climbing up the tree to pick pears to eat. The third panel was about his friend eating pears and asking him why he didn't pick pears to eat. Su Heng's dialogue box said, I can't pick pears, because this pear tree isn't mine. The fourth panel sublimated the theme again. It was about Su Heng's friend who was puzzled. It's a time of war now. This pear tree doesn't have an owner. Why do you care? Su Heng said, The pear tree doesn't have an owner, but in my heart, it has an owner. It isn't mine. Even if the fruit ripens and falls, I won't pick it up. The comic here was different from the original. Because it had been modified by Yang Yi, he couldn't make it too complicated in the comic. The key was to make it easy to understand. For the second comic, Yang Yi drew a completely different cartoon style. The first panel was about an old farmer who found that a lot of watermelons in his melon field had been ruined. He was biting a piece here and there, and the old man was wiping his tears sadly. The second panel was about the old man who decided to secretly hide in the haystack next to the melon field, waiting for a thief to steal his melon. Interestingly, this panel was divided into 2 parts. On the other side, a round figure appeared in the melon field in the middle of the night. The third panel was naturally about the old man turning on the lights and catching the thief. However, what surprised Shi and Lon Xin was that the round melon thief was actually a black and white panda with dark circles under his eyes. That's right, it was the panda they had just seen. In this panel, the panda was shedding tears of shame. Because it was a cartoon, he even said, I'm sorry, old man. I know I was wrong. As long as you let me go, you can punish me however you want. You can twist my ears, hit my hands, or kick my butt. The fourth panel of the comic had the same ending. The old man magnanimously forgave the panda and even picked a big and round watermelon for him to eat. The panda was very happy and said in return, Old man, you're really a good person. I want to stay and watch over the melon field with you. The 2 comics each had their own emphasis. However, unsurprisingly, The second comic with a cartoon style and a little fairy tale flavor was favored by Shi and Lon Xin. Shi and Lon Xin both fought to tell the story of the second comic. Moreover, perhaps because the cartoon style and the panda attracted her attention, Lon Xin didn't think of the incident where she secretly ate the biscuits 2 weeks ago. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.